Okay, so I think we will make a start. So, good afternoon, members, officers, and any members of the public in the public gallery or viewing the live stream. Welcome to this meeting of Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Graham Cohn and I'm chairing this meeting. My vice chair is sitting to my left, Councillor Stephen Drew. I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. Committee members, may I remind you that you should have before you the main agenda. Those in the chamber are reminded that this meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you are deemed to have consented to being filmed and the use of images and sound recordings for a webcast and archive recordings. The normal procedure at Scrutiny and Overview Committee meetings is to review and make recommendations to Cabinet by acclamation. Only those members of the committee present in the chamber will be able to move and second motions or affirm. However, members present virtually may speak in the debate. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their cameras and microphones remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you and speak clearly when addressing the room. Finally, a report of this meeting will be presented to Cabinet at its meeting on the 25th of November. So we will move on. Do we have any apologies for absence there?
Yes, Chair, and we have apologies from Councillor Judith Whippeth and also Cabinet members, Councillor John Williams, Peter MacDonald, and I've just noticed that Natalie Warren-Green's online, so apologies.
Lovely, thank you for that. Does anyone have any declarations of interest? Councillor Stobart.
Chair, I'd just like to tell the committee I'm a member of CamCycle. Now, I don't know whether active travel will come up this evening, but I'm a member of CamCycle and also the campaign group Rail Future, and we will probably talk about rail at some point.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stobart. Councillor Dr. Martin Khan.
I'm a member of Planning Committee, but in the comments, you'll see it's relevant perhaps later on. My brother is chair of RSPB.
Thank you.
So that may come up related to Cambridge North, Camborne North.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other declarations of interest? Councillor Bygott.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm also a member of Rail Future.
Thank you for that. Councillor Howray.
Since Councillor Stobart's declared this, then I'll mention that I'm also a member of CamCycle.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I work for the Wildlife Trust for Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Northamptonshire.
Thank you for that. If any other declarations become apparent during the meeting, just please feel free to declare them as we move forward. So moving on to item 4, minutes of the previous meeting, pages 5 to 10. Is the committee happy that it's an accurate representation of the meeting held on the 11th of September 25? Or does anybody have any adjustments or alterations that they want to note? Okay, Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
On page 7, in relation to rural exception sites, I did raise some points in relation to the effect of grey belt on rural exception sites, which haven't been recorded, but I'm happy to leave it as it is because I think they may be relevant later.
Thank you for noting that, Councillor Fane. Councillor Bradnam.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I think it's just a typo, but also on page 7, second bullet, SI 12A, small 3, number of trees provided for planting in local communities, including through 6 free trees. There was a lot of deliberation about the number of trees, people that could still be planted. I think it probably, you just need to delete the word people from those minutes. I think it's the number of trees that could still be planted.
Okay, yeah, I see where you are. Yeah. Thank you for noting that, Councillor Bradnam. Any other amendments to the minutes? Okay, then we will move on. So item 5 is public questions. We haven't had any. So we will move on to item 6, which is the substantive item in your agenda papers 11 to 30, the Greater Cambridge Local Plan. I just want to draw members' attention to the fact that, you'll see on page 12 of your agenda what we're trying to achieve in making sure that this document is in a fit state to go to consultation, essentially. I have tried to sort of split the agenda up a little bit, or put some headings in. So those headings will sort of be as follows. So I thought we'd talk about the consultation first, which is up on the screen, strategy, individual sites, jobs, then we would have a short break. You said it was up on the screen, but it isn't. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, so yeah, so it's just the title of this one, consultation, is up on screen, and that should change as we move forward. Yes, Councillor Bradnam.
It'd be extremely helpful if we could see all of the, so that we know where to slot our questions in.
I don't know if we've got that to hand, but what I can do is read them out so you can note them. So let me start from the top again, just so everyone's clear. So we will have the first heading as consultation, the second heading as strategy. Then we'll move on to individual sites, jobs. Then we'll have a short break. Then we'll talk about housing and homes. Then infrastructure. Green issues. Place. And then any other business. Does anybody want me to repeat those at all? Everybody's happy with that? What I would say is, I am happy if questions don't quite fit into any of those categories, but if we could try and broadly put them into those sections, it will just help the meeting flow a little bit, help members of the Cabinet and officers address those questions. But, we will take questions as they come. If they fall slightly out of that, it's not a huge issue, okay? So I think if we start by taking questions on the consultation, does any member want to talk on that? Councillor Leeming.
So I have two questions. My first question is precisely which documents that are in this list will be consulted on? Is it all of them, including the appendices? Are they there just for information for people, or are there specific documents that will be consulted on? That was my first question.
Thank you, Councillor Leeming. So I'll come to Councillor Bridget Smith in the first instance. Yeah?
So I think I know the answer, but I think I would far rather that somebody from Development Control answered that if it just...
Please do.
Wrong.
Thank you, Chair. So the main document is the draft local plan. So that's clearly the policies and proposals we'll mainly be seeking views on, and that's supported by a policies map, which effectively is a spatial interpretation of those policies. The other thing we will be consulting on is the sustainability appraisal and habitats regulation assessment. So they effectively test alternatives that were available on those policies and so on. It's a technical requirement to consult on those as well. The rest of the documents are largely supporting information. So what you've got in front of you is for each of the main themes in the plan, we've put together a topic paper. And what that really gives us a chance to do is explain in more detail, how do we get to this point? How do we consider all the issues that have been put to us through the consultation of carrying out so far? What's some of the detailed evidence behind those policies? And hopefully they will help people comment on the plan itself. There are then various other documents supporting. So there's a statement of consultation, a due to cooperate statement that shows how we've talked to our neighbours and so on. And then a long list of evidence documents, which again help inform the local plan itself. So the main consultation, I would say, will be around the plan and the policies within it, but supported by an awful lot of information for people who want to find out more.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, that's really helpful. My second question is, if people wanted to wade through the appendices, as I may have done, would it be possible for them to be aggregated in different ways, please? So there's around, I'm speaking probably in the most extreme case with Camborne, but there's about 20 appendices. If they could be either grouped in the website on a specific area or put in one document, which is sort of by location. And then perhaps it could go the other way as well, that if somebody wanted to look at, for instance, all the green infrastructure appendices, they could be, and it's sort of just, at the moment we've just got a list of many, many appendices, and it's not always that clear how they fit together. It's not that easy to get through. I'm just thinking if the general public want to look at the things that are related to a specific thing, it would help. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So I understand. So I will come to officers to say what can be done, what we can go away and think about. My understanding is that this document unusually is written to be read online. It's not written to be a PDF. And actually, if anybody has gone to the trouble of printing it out, I believe it doesn't particularly lend itself to being printed out. So, the reason that it's been written for online consumption is that it's so big, there's so much of it, and actually it makes it considerably easier to navigate around it. But my response, and I will come back to Jonathan probably, is that if there are specific requirements, then I'm sure we can take them away and have a think about them.
Quite agree. We are completely aware of the need to get this in a better form for consultation, and it's almost been more challenging to create PDF committee versions than put it online. So we will have an interactive document online because it's a very data-driven format we're trying to create. We'll have an interactive proposals map so you can scroll around the map rather than having to wade through PDFs. A number of the documents have digital versions, so the Housing and Economic Land Availability Assessment, which is many, many PDFs in the background documents, works far better as a digital tool, which I hope to put up as well. So our job now, if the consultation is approved, is to make it a much more accessible live version that people can comment on as easily as possible.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, John. That's really helpful. I think you're saying that we're seeing it like the ingredients of the cake before it's actually going to be bound together, which is really helpful. The only way I could find everything that was to do with Camborne was to do Control-Alt-F for the word Camborne and troll down the list of appendices. But if it's going to be put in a much more friendly form online, I'm really grateful to hear that. Thank you.
Stephen Kelly.
I wonder, Chair, whether on this topic it's probably helpful to give a little bit of an overview because absolutely this is, in a way, this is a false premise in terms of what the plan will be like to navigate through.
Yeah, brief overview
so
for
I think
Councillor Lehman.
if Lizzie Wood could perhaps explain how we're going to approach that issue of consultation with these documents, it might help the committee understand the kind of
Thank you.
ambition.
Now it's working. Thank you, Chair.
Perfect. Thank you.
So just to respond on the point before as well, we're happy to look at the formatting and structure ahead of Cabinet meeting to make sure there are really clear headings that help you navigate the document library. We also are working with a bit of a an issue with file sizes, so everything has to be under 20 megabytes, hence why the HELA appendices is in, I think, 38 parts at the moment. As part of the consultation, we would like to have the local plan as the main document that people will be commenting on. So we'll have a digital local plan, like we did for first proposals in 2021, where you can comment on each element of the plan, such as a specific site or a policy that you're interested in the most. We're also preparing a summary document, so it'll be the local plan, but in under 30 pages. So that'll be really helpful with engagement with our communities and picking up on those key points in the plan itself. More generally, on the consultation, we'll host a series of in-person and online events, and they'll be sort of targeted to different elements of the plan, so site-specific for the bigger sites we're looking at and making sure that we're going out to our communities and talking to the people most affected and impacted by the plan. And we'd also like to reach out to our underrepresented groups and really engage meaningfully with those people. So at the moment we're organising lectures and seminars at both universities. We're going out to the Gypsy and Travelling community as well, and trying to engage with older people who might not necessarily be involved in the planning world. So we're really trying to focus our engagement on those groups that we can. More generally as well, we'll put out a series of events, so there'll be a huge log of all the events that we can be involved in, but we really want to hear from you as our members if you have any suggestions on where we should go, who we should target. We've already started prepping for the Christmas fairs and having stalls there to be on the ground and hear from our communities. And we're setting up our iPads so that we can take feedback in person on the day, not have to send people off with a load of leaflets and flyers, but there are a number of methods that we're trying to work with at the moment. So hopefully that gives a bit of an overview of what we're trying to achieve. Once we go through Scrutiny and Cabinet, we'll do a series of members' briefings. We'll give you a members' briefing pack so you can use that with your communities as well, and then more engagement events to follow. So I think that helps with a bit of context.
Thank you for that. I was just going to chip in at that point, actually. I was wondering, because I know you said there's going to be some sort of events logged, essentially, where you're going to be and how you're going to sort of approach that consultation. I couldn't see those online yet. Have they been published? Because I did look and I couldn't.
No, essentially we wanted to get through this week to make sure that everyone is on board with going out to consultation, and then we can proceed to publish those, and it will essentially have a list of the dates, location, and more information for members of the public to see.
So that would be published imminently after this meeting, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay. And in terms of most of the public probably are not very in tune with the current local plan, but I was wondering if there could be almost like a where we're at and where we're moving to document, and as you rightly indicated, that could be online and interactive and everything else, but I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing to do or not in terms of public engagement, but it would be not. I think it would be nice to see exactly where we're moving to from our current position. I know it's an ever-growing document, but yeah.
No, that's really good feedback. We've started to work with our graphics consultants to produce a series of videos. The first one we published a week ago to say that we're going through this process, but we're going to do another one that says the stage of plan making that we're at, and the previous Reg 18 stage that we were at and still are in, and how we see the journey of this plan for the next year and a half. So happy to work on that.
Perfect. And just one more from me before I, fine. How small do you think we could summarise the local plan document to? Could it be 10 pages, 20 pages, 50 pages, or what is your ambition to get that so it's still got the information that the public need but is accessible?
So at the moment it's 830 pages, and my colleagues and I have got it down to 30. We can be ambitious and try even further, but we don't want to lose the ambition of the proposed sites and DM policies, but we'll try our best to narrow it down, and we're using quite a lot of infographics so it's visually pleasing. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I was going to come to Councillor Richard Stobart next.
Chair, thank you. Well, that presentation from Lizzie was actually very helpful in regard to some of the things that I wanted to raise. Just one or two points. Just on, maybe it's down in the weeds, but I just wanted to say the use of the UN Sustainability Development Goals has appeared in the Climate and Nature Strategy document, and I wondered how it could feature in the local plan, because at least those two worlds do touch each other, and the adoption of sustainable development goals does set certain of our objectives in context. So I just wanted to put that out for a thought. It's not absolutely essential, but I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah.
The second is the units that appear throughout the documents are SI units, they're kilograms and they're meters and so on, but the presentation can be a little inconsistent. So I'd just like that to be picked up and for it to be consistent through the document.
Okay, let's take those two. Shall I come to Lizzie? Yeah.
I think John might be best placed for the first
Oh.
question, but I'll take the second when
Yeah.
it's finished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So the UN targets are encompassed in our climate and nature strategy, which we're consulting on to the best of my knowledge, and will also be referred to in the local nature recovery strategy, which I think is coming to you fairly soon, if it hasn't already come to you. So it's going to, I'm sorry, it's going to SEAC. I've had a whisper in my ear.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for that. And then shall I come back to Lizzie on the second point? Oh, it's just, yeah, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, recognise your point on consistency. We are doing thorough checks at the moment and proofreading it ahead of consultation, so we'll make sure we pick up on that point.
Perfect. Richard Stobart.
Yeah, Chair, just one comment, one question. So the comment is that the perspectives that you just raised, for example, different ways of reading, or going out into the communities and checking out with people as to the way they might read that. I warmly welcome that, because I was thinking, having read the documents, I'm a parish councillor, how do I handle this? Or I'm a member of a particular community, how do I handle this? I think that is being properly addressed. Just on the nature of the consultation, how it's presented, I'm just wondering, and given the kind of presentation, this is kind of state-of-the-art digital consultation, but I wondered how that would compare. There's a lot of talk in the planning world of the use of commonplace, for example, as a digital tool. How does this compare with, if you will, the state of the art? In other words, what are we proposing and how does it compare?
Lizzie on that? Yeah? Or? Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very good question. There are a number of consultation platforms out there at the moment that are available to councils. We have one called Opus Consult, which we've used for a number of years now. It's very easy for people to use it in terms of being able to work through the document, submit their comments. But as John mentioned earlier, to supplement that, we also have a number of other digital tools at our disposal. So we will have interactive maps that we'll be able to use. So that's not a commonplace tool, but it's a similar type of thing. So people will be able to scroll around, see all of the sites, all of the designations within an interactive map. They can turn on and off the layers. In addition to that, all of the site assessments that we've done, rather than trawling through all of the PDFs, they'll be available on a web map, which is an enhancement from what we've got at the moment because we don't have that functionality. So there are a number of things that we're looking at in terms of how we can try and make the plan more digital. We have incredibly high aspirations when it comes to our digital tools and doing as much as we can. And hopefully we are building on what we did at first proposals. And then hopefully for the consultation next year, we'll be able to go even further.
Perfect. Councillor Stobart, do you want to come back?
That's all very encouraging, Chair. So we're going to be state of the art, which I think is where we should be aiming.
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to move on. Councillor Richard Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. Very quick one, because my question essentially has been answered. I was very pleased to hear about the 30-page summary. I think that's excellent if the public are going to meaningfully engage with this. I did want to just say, though, I think it would have been useful if we could have seen that here, because I'm not quite sure what one of our roles as a scrutiny committee is to endorse something for public consultation. It would have been useful to see what the public will see, because it's actually difficult for us to assess that under these papers.
Thank you. Do you want to just comment on that, Stephen Kelly? Or Toomey, did you?
I'll defer to Stephen Kelly.
Yeah, fine.
I think I understand the point. There's a note of caution here. There is a statutory consultation on a development plan, which is the document that is in front of you. In a sense, we can't formally consult on a 30-page guide, and it has to conform with it because there will be legal tests. But I mean, I suspect.
I think what Councillor Williams was alluding to is it might not have been nice to see a draft of that document prior to. Yeah, but
I recognise that.
Accept,
I think what I would say is until we know whether you're prepared to agree this document, writing a summary of this document is premature. But we'd be more than happy to share with members what that looks like. And obviously, the objective, of course, is to make it accessible and legible to you.
Thank you for that. We'll move on. Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I wanted to say that in common, right from the first conversation that we had at the Guild in Cambridge, this whole document keeps its character all the way through, and it's wonderfully easy to read. Previous member Douglas de Lacey would be delighted that you have, and I too am delighted that you haven't used abbreviations. You've written things in full. It's easy to read. It's accessible. So in terms of the character and style of the document, I think it's excellent. Thank you very much indeed. So what I wanted to ask about in terms of the consultation was, will you do any kind of helpful navigation guide for anybody so that you might, I'm just dream this up as I speak, so don't take it as a fixed thing, but it might be helpful to say, so if you're interested, we recommend you read the first X pages, the introduction and the explanation, and the bit about how you can respond. But if you're particularly concerned about a particular site, you might find it useful to go to these documents here. Or if you're particularly concerned about green infrastructure, you might want to go to this topic document here. Or to give an indication of how people might navigate through all the numerous documents on the website. And in particular, I think it's really important that you explain before people get to these that the HELA documents were suggestions. They may not actually be in the local plan, because otherwise people will look at the thing, they'll see, oh, HELA document from, I'll say, my village, Milton, and they'll get all in a tizzy about what's in there. And I think it would be really helpful if we could explain what status those HELA documents have. So,
thank you for that. Yeah, please do. Is it Terry? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very good point, Councillor Bradnam, and it's something that we're looking at. So one of the things that we want to do in terms of our digital tools is develop a page called a story map, and essentially that will be like a page that, as you kind of scroll through it, it gives you a kind of high-level summary of what all of the chapters contain, and it will be supported with visuals as well. So, for example, it may have a bit around sites, and it will give a very high overview. We're looking to develop a number of sites across the Greater Cambridge area. Some of the ones that people might be interested in are, for example, Camborne and Camborne North, Grange Farm, the biomedical campus. And then built of that, we can develop the map within there. You can have visuals and things like that. So it will hopefully give people a bit of a landing page before they kind of get into the detail of the plan and the policies and all of the sites. It will give them a bit of a high-level overview so they can kind of jump to the bits that are important to them. So if their key aim is to look at the document they're desperate to find out what we're saying about biodiversity. That landing page will be really easy to navigate. We'll have little icons along the top. You can just jump straight to the themes, biodiversity, and it will take you to that section of the plan.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Bradnam, did you want to come back on that at all?
Thank you. So that's great. And I think, first and foremost, we need to put ourselves in the shoes of the people who are reading this for the first time, maybe on a mobile phone, not on a laptop, just so that give people a clear way of navigating through, the options for navigating through. I think it would be really helpful to do that at the outset. Short sentence.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bradnam. I think that's been noted through, that will be taken on board. I think we'll come to Councillor Heather Williams next.
Thank you. And I do sympathise with the response was given earlier. It does feel like you've got sort of the chicken and the egg and which comes first. You can't do the summary and you can't do draft consultations. You've got this document. And I do wonder whether we're trying to take too much in one go, perhaps, because definitely I'd feel more comfortable if I could see what the consultation was going to be, if that makes sense, or have sort of a soft launch for councillors to see the website first. We did discuss this at length at the joint planning advisory group. So, and a lot of that was around accessibility and making sure that actually people with neurodiversity, dyslexia and the like have sort of equal access to this. So I would like some reassurance that that is being taken into consideration as you're looking, and also, Chair.
I'm seeing a lot of nods on that, so I'm assuming that has been taken into consideration.
And we're talking a lot about the online, and I appreciate most people will do things online, but what are the provisions for those that aren't online?
Okay, provisions for people not online. We'll just very briefly touch on that.
Thank you, Chair. So we will put paper copies of the main plan and supporting documents, not the extensive evidence base, in public libraries, and upon request, members of the public can come to us and see them in the council building, or we can send copies to them upon that request. We're trying to minimise what we print because there is a climate emergency and we would like to be sustainable with this plan. So we're happy to look at the options we have. I think we did put that in the list of methods of publication in the JPAG report. So we can make sure that there are options available to everyone to access.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. I think there sort of needs to be almost a hybrid sort of system where a lot of people will have one screen that they might be able to look at the documents on, but perhaps feel more comfortable filling in a paper copy. If you don't have multiple screens, I try to do this just on one screen, just look at the documents and trying to fill something in, it could become difficult. So I think that would be a nice thing to see as well, if there is, and if we could have a copy of that that we could see as well ahead of it going out, just to make sure that the language isn't leading as well.
Okay, Lizzie.
Yes, so for every consultation we encourage people to fill out the form online, but we have a printed version available. They are standard forms that we've used for all of our consultations, I think, for the last 10 years, but we can look at the wording to make sure that it's very clear for everyone to access.
Thank you for that. We'll move on. Councillor Dr. Martin Khan, please. Sean Mike.
Many years ago, I did a consultation on a strategic plan, but in a rather similar situation. The one thing that struck me is that in the site visits, in the meetings in the community, people will come in and they look at the nice general plan about the structure, and then they look what happens to me. And I think you're going to find the majority of people, that's what's going to interest them. As you target your individual locations, are you going to have specific information about that location and in detail? Because I think that would be important.
Chumi, please.
I think, first of all, that the way in which we're planning to do this is something that we've improved on from the first proposals, and we are actually trailblazing. What we will have is officers will have their laptops with them so that people can actually, go deep in and they can then see what it is that concerns them. It'll be challenging to decide what will be, the focus that people in a certain area would want to look at. And as we've already said, we're trying to minimize what we print because we're trying to be green to our core. But definitely there's ways in which people can go deep down into what specifically is of interest to them.
Thank you for that, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Khan, did you want to briefly
I just wanted to comment, but you will have been having panels, banners, exhibition boards, or is it just going to be on sort of online local meetings?
Stephen Kelly.
I suppose, what's the ambition? The ambition here is that everybody who turns up understands what's going on, and as we've said, sensitivities around different topics will be different in different areas. I think one of the kind of paradigm shifts that the consultation process is trying to engage with is that everyone will have a unique experience of this plan depending upon what their interest is. It's the difference between, as we've said, we've prepared PDFs for you, which are a kind of static rendering of this document. Every person that walks through the door may well say, well, I'm interested in this site, but I'm also interested in how the green agenda affects that. Their journey through the plan will be effectively unique. And so by having tablets, as Lizzie said, at those events, very much like when you walk into a bank or so on, we expect to be able to walk people through their journey. And so there will be banners encouraging people to engage with us. And we hope then that they get a really positive experience of what absolutely interests them without all the other fluff.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Khan, for your question. I don't have any other speakers unless Councillor Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. Just to get one in at the end here.
Yeah.
I had a few questions, but they've mostly been covered already. One small point that I wanted to make about scanning through the documents. So I refer back to the 2018 local plan frequently. And one of the things I like about it is how easy it is to find the policies from the preamble because they're in coloured boxes. And so far I've found it a little harder to separate the policies from the preamble and the detail in this one. I can kind of see that it's different, but I just wanted to comment that when people are reading this, they might want to home in on just the policies and go for this policy, that policy, and so having them standing out is really helpful. The main question I wanted to ask was, what kind of targeted engagement do we have for younger members of our community, so under 30s, for example, during this consultation? Because as with many consultations, I know it's going to be harder to reach younger people than it is to reach older people. So I wondered what there is that's targeted for that audience.
I will bring Councillor Bridget Smith in. I know Lizzie's indicated to speak as well. I've obviously we've touched on some of those communities, but in specific sort of younger people. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So, I mean, I was very reassured by what Lizzie said about, the fact that we're obviously going all out to target, those groups who are more difficult to engage with. I think, I'm aware that it's a work in progress. And I would suggest that if any members have any specific suggestions relating to hard-to-reach communities within their own wards, that actually they pass that information on to Lizzie. But as far as I can see it, we are going way over and above what this council has ever done before, on top of which, I'm picking up on what Councillor Bradnam said. I don't think I've ever enjoyed reading a local plan before, but this is written in such accessible way and such plain English. It was a pleasurable experience, which was not something I ever thought I would say. So I think, the very fact that it's been written so well, goes a long way to making it accessible to just about everybody. I'm just being reminded as well that, we do now have an award-winning youth engagement service, and I'm sure we will be exploiting them to the nth degree. But again, can I just also add, but if members themselves, so this is already explained that we will all be given our own kind of community engagement packs. If we want to take it into our local elderly care facility or anything like that, or our local play school or the scout group or whatever, then actually I think that's a very nice job for local members to do that engagement on that very local level.
Perfect, thank you for that. Very briefly, Lizzie, so I think the point's been covered, but yeah.
Thank you, I'll keep it very short. In terms of boxes and colouring, we've had a lot of issues with our web team and the accessibility requirements. We're no longer allowed to use boxes, so we're trying to make it as easy to see that it's a policy, but we can have another look at that in the future. And yes, thank you. We have got a long list of engagement, and as we've mentioned, youth engagement service is one of the key ways to target the youth, but we've also worked with Cambridge Ahead and their Young Advisory Committee, and that's helped us to engage more widely with young people across the districts.
Thank you for that. Do you want to come in on this point just very briefly? Because Councillor Stobart wants to come in next.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, you said we're not allowed to use boxes. Who's micromanaging as such?
Chair,
Stephen Kelly.
Just to highlight, there is a national data standard on accessibility.
Okay, so it's a
UK
national
government
standard
has
that you're following.
that we have to, and we are audited on all of our publications against that standard, and so we've had to comply with it, and particularly on a document as important as this, where people will want to use different formats to read or understand the document.
Okay, I think we'll move on. Anything, do you want to come back, Councillor? Yeah, very briefly, because we need to move on to the next.
Say thank you for the responses. You've answered my questions very well, but also to say a huge thank you for the sheer amount of work that's gone into this document, because I know our job today is to scrutinise, and we're picking a lot of holes, but the amount of work that's gone into producing this is tremendous, and so I think it's important to
thank you for that. Councillor Stobart, please.
Yeah, maybe a point of detail and maybe betray my ignorance, but I was looking through for the public art policy. Yeah, I searched and I branched out and, for example, look at cultural and creative hubs and so on. But then it occurred to me that actually there are supplementary planning documents on public art. And so it got me to thinking, how this is set in the context of what is, in a sense, the current set of supplementary planning documents and other supporting documents, and we need to make reference to those. So could I just ask the rather naive question, how does this fit with our, if you will, suite of SPDs and other supporting documents?
Lizzie.
I think this may be best placed under the place theme, but very briefly, we do have the policy on establishing high quality places and public realm, and we do pinpoint to public art there. I think maybe we open that up for a bit more discussion under the places section, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Stobart.
It wasn't so much, thank you, wasn't so much a question about public art, and it would be great to come back to that in due course, but it was, where do the SPDs fit with this network of documents?
Stephen Kelly, please.
This is the development plan. The SPDs will still continue to exist against, as matters of policy. We can have SPDs under the current planning framework, but clearly the SPDs are supplementary planning documents to the existing plan. And as we bring the plan forward, once it's adopted, there is then potentially an opportunity to review those SPDs and bring them into the new planning framework. The new planning regime overall, so for the next plan, will not provide for SPDs. That's the simplification that's taken place. But nothing will happen to these. They will sit alongside, but of course, we've got 3 years or so before we get to adoption.
Thank you for that. I think we'll move on if that's okay now. So if we move on to the next heading, which I think was strategy. Lovely. Who would like to start on strategy? Councillor Anna Bradnam, please.
Just for fun, I've got some kind of global questions, really. When we're looking at new developments, and I'm thinking in terms of, we've got some specific sites where we've got new developments. I'm just wondering how to include in the strategy some things that we should always at least consider putting into a development, even if we don't in the end, but we should at least consider them. And so I will just say, the following: cemetery space, cultural space, and maybe not in one, but in a cluster, swimming pool. And then I was thinking about that, and then I suddenly thought, heard something on the radio this morning about our prisons being overcrowded. Do we need to plan for a prison in the area? I know that sounds a bit bizarre, but it made me think about our responsibility to the wider area and whether we need to be thinking about that in terms of our strategy as well. So my actual ask in the strategy is, can we always make sure that whenever we're planning a big local development, like, for example, Kemble North, sorry, I'm not suggesting we put a prison there necessarily, but cemetery space is essential, cultural space is essential, and swimming pools important. You know,
thank you for that. I think that's noted. Jonathan Dixon.
There's two answers to this. So firstly, in the well-being chapter, there's a very clear policy that if you're designing a new community, so one of the large sites mentioned, it absolutely has to be planned with the right range of services and facilities, thinking about when they're needed and so on. So that's a policy requirement. But one of the evidence documents supporting the plan is an infrastructure delivery plan. We've done a lot of work exploring with service providers and so on the sorts of facilities that will be needed to go along with each of the sites in the plan as well. And that document will continue to evolve. So I think we're addressing that in two ways. So I absolutely agree. Places where designing need to have the right infrastructure.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bradnam, did you want to come back?
My only observation is that, let's face it, a swimming pool is an expensive thing to deliver, and individual developers may not be wildly keen to be tied to that commitment. Whereas I think we need to be thinking about, what do we feel as strategy setters, what do we feel we need in the area?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So, you know, within Cabinet, we've had the complexities of swimming pools explained to us at some length, and there needs to be a critical mass of people. And you know, as well as being expensive to install, they are outrageously expensive to run and maintain, which is why they are closing down throughout the whole of the UK, but councils simply cannot afford to keep them going. So again, you know, this will probably have to be down to commercial decisions, but it will depend very much on the size of the communities that are going to be using swimming pools. So yes, they are a sports amenity, but you know, we aren't going to have them in communities with only 10,000 houses, because was it 23,000 is the kind of magic figure, or was it 27, something like that? But okay. It was a lot of houses.
I think, yeah, Councillor Bradnam.
I did make the point that this might be in clusters,
yeah,
you know, so
yeah,
not just for one.
Okay, I think.
But don't forget, if we don't have swimming pools and children do not learn to swim, we will have children drowning. So you know, I know it's I know how expensive it is, strangely, to run a swimming pool, but I'm simply saying that we need to consider what we need as a community, as an area.
Yeah,
and then
I think the point has been made. Did you want to come back on that, Stephen Kelly?
Well, just to clarify, because yeah. in some respects, the strategy in this case, when you look at the rationale for delivering larger settlements as opposed to dispersed growth, is specifically focused around that point about a critical mass of population to support the most facilities, whether it's faith-related facilities, community centres and so on, because we've learned over time with the previous plans and indeed the lessons of site development, that the viability considerations and the balanced choices that we make in terms of how that infrastructure is funded through land value uplift are really important to understand for each site. So at a strategy level, everything in the strategy that we put forward is designed to optimise the capacity of new development to deliver the maximum amount of community and related infrastructure. If you disperse that growth, which would be a contrary strategy to the one that we've identified, you diminish your ability to effectively serve that new community. So Camborne North, for example, as one of the new sites in the emerging strategy, will create a substantial population, which will improve Camborne's viability for all of that upper tier infrastructure massively. and we know how difficult it's been to deliver that commercially propositions in that space. So from a strategy perspective, we're doing everything that we can to deliver that. The implementation comes down to planning committees, but it also comes down to the policy framework, and the policy framework is designed, as John said, through...
I think that's clear. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah. I think we'll move on. So, Councillor Richard Stobart, please.
Chair, thank you. So the things I'm going to raise, I think, are strategy, but do shut me down if they need to go somewhere else.
We'll take them.
Can I just start off with maybe a comment and a question about the demands the local plan places on the planning service itself. So this is more ambitious than the last local plan, and because of the nature of the communities we're looking at, will be more demanding. There are more interactions, more disciplines involved, and somebody will be watching out for the kind of team size and discipline and staff complements and so on. But are we thinking about that in parallel? So as this local plan is taking shape, are we thinking about, well, what are the staff implications? Does this double the size of the planning team, for example? And could I just add to that, on the kind of engineering solutions that will be put forward? So, you know, we're in the thick of talking about wastewater handling, and you know, when we interrogate a new plan for the wastewater management, are we perceiving the kind of engineering, kind of variation in engineering that can occur? So I just want to extend that idea into this new domain we're thinking about, where the engineering challenges will be significant, and we need, as members, but primarily the planning team, to actually interrogate what might be quite intricate and complex solutions. So I just wanted to raise that. So with staffing and skill levels.
Councillor Toomey Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Bearing in mind this is an emerging local plan, and I don't think we will be seeing it come into force until probably another couple of years, maybe 3. In the meantime, we have a fully staffed service that is dealing with the current workload associated with the current adopted local plan. And obviously, we will be looking at what we need to do going forward. We might not even be South Cambs by then. But yes, all we can do is, as and when we need to look at the staffing level with the workload that exists. For now, the workload is what we're dealing with the current adopted local plan.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bridget Smith, did you briefly want to come in? I've got a lot of speakers on this.
So just the second part of that question. So there's a very good, clear section in the report about, you know, what the barriers are. So it's, you know, so it's very well articulated about the issues of water and wastewater in particular. So they're identified clearly in the plan, and the direction of travel has been identified in what's in front of you as well.
Thank you for that. I think we'll move on if that's okay. Richard, or have you got?
Fine, because I think I can raise the others under the different topic headings.
Thank you. Councillor Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. So my question, I realise that the main focus of the plan is on the larger developments, but my question is about some of the smaller developments that we already have, so the group villages. And I wanted to ask about the policies in the context of sustainability of group villages. So on section 2129, page 85, it says all group villages have at least a primary school, and limited development will help maintain remaining services and facilities and provide for affordable housing to meet local needs. So really the focus of my question is about the future of our primary schools and the trajectory that we're seeing today. I think the sustainability of primary schools in group villages is a good indicator of whether those communities are thriving or in a trajectory of decline. Because when a village loses its primary school, the character changes. It has a broader effect on community life. It makes it harder for other community activities to be sustained. Parents end up driving their children to school in another village where they'd previously be able to walk. And many of our village primary schools have seen reduced headcount in recent years. They're seeing admissions significantly below their published admission numbers. So this suggests that the future of village primary schools is not necessarily really secure at this point. So my question is, what level of verification has been done on the policies for group villages to make sure that they are fit for purpose and will succeed in the stated aim of maintaining and hopefully even improving the services like primary schools that we have in those villages today?
Councillor Toomey Hawkins, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure I quite understand the question, to be honest. I mean, group villages are what they are. You know, the definition is there. We haven't actually put new developments in villages. We've tried to, you know, because again, the sustainability issue. The idea is that the group villages that can take development, yes, we can identify sites, but most of the sites that we've put forward are outside of those, the bigger settlements. That's what we expect to have the growth. When we have applications that come in, obviously we consult with the education people in county, and I'm sure by the time this comes in, we'll probably all be in one unitary authority anyway, but it's them that will give us the information on whether or not you know, the school has the numbers or doesn't, or you know, what they require to make it work. So at this point in time, all we can do is identify where we think it's sustainable to put sites, and we have limited the number of villages.
Councillor Hobro, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, so I suppose I'm looking for the confidence that we feel the policies are adequate, that we will be able to do that, that we'll be able to make sure that these primary schools and other similar facilities do remain sustainable, and that we're, you know, we're confident enough that that will be possible, that the policies have the flexibility that will allow that to happen.
I think Councillor Toomey Hawkins has sort of alluded to that, but Stephen Kelly, yeah.
Well, just to say, I mean, clearly there's a dialogue with the Education Authority and the County Council. They haven't indicated any adverse position in respect of what we're putting forward at this moment in time. The strategy from a climate change perspective and the spatial priorities that we previously set sought to make sure that we didn't, on the back of the history of unstructured expansion of our villages, that we didn't amplify the kind of concerns both from a climate change perspective but also from the legacy of the 5-year land supply. So we haven't proposed it. We will of course continue to engage the County Council as Education Authority, and of course in due course the unitary authority that will be responsible for education policy in the future.
Thank you for that. I think that's clear. Are you happy with that? Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to Councillor Helen Leeming, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions that are completely poles apart in strategy. My first question is to do with nature corridors. So when people are sort of looking at building new sites, creating new, either creating new habitats or even preserving existing habitats, nature as a whole is much more resilient if those sites are connected, if there are corridors where species can move, and they're quite, the sorts of things that would involve are quite broad, so things like roadside verges or hedges, field margins, rivers, streams. It's ensuring that wildlife can travel from site to site, which will increase the resilience of our struggling native species. So I was wondering whether that is something that's been deeply considered in this plan. I was looking at the green infrastructure sections of the plan. I couldn't find things about the corridors, but I'm sure it's sort of underpinning.
Let's start with that.
I would like to know what people's thoughts are on that, please.
And I'll come back to you for the second question. Lovely. Yeah, Stuart, is it? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, so there's two bits to this, I guess. So there's the green infrastructure evidence, which looks at a whole range of evidence, both about space for people, space for wildlife. We did engage with all the relevant bodies to inform that. And you probably see in the plan the strategic green infrastructure initiatives, some of which are kind of geography, kind of locale specific, as it were, and some are more corridor based. I guess the more recent part to that is the local nature recovery strategy, which we have a draft of. And we've done, because it's kind of come along, I guess, in parallel, but a little bit behind the local plan, we've done a check of that in relation to the strategy and the sites in the plan to whether they match well, support the opportunities and don't do negative things to the existing biodiversity. I think it's a good pointer to go away and look at whether we've strengthened or have good firm wording on networks and creating networks. Obviously, the plan itself can only do things where development occurs, so it's limited, but it can contribute to that. So I would hope that the green infrastructure policy and the biodiversity policy together are pretty strong, but it's a helpful pointer to go away and check that wording.
Thank you for that, and I think the recommendation's been taken on board. Councillor Lehman, did you want to come in back? Did you want to come in on this point, Councillor Bearpart? Yeah, fine.
Okay, thank you. So that policy, is that going to underpin some of the stuff that's in the formal consultation? Because you mentioned some sustainability policies that would be part of the consultation.
Yes, so there's the biodiversity policy
Yep.
And the green infrastructure policy are in the biodiversity and climate change, so the biodiversity chapter there. And then I guess also relevant is some of the biggest sites have quite significant green infrastructure proposals associated with them. You'll see at Camborne, for example, and that is, I guess, is also part of space for people, but also space for nature.
Thank you. Could I just ask that, that you consider that building resilience in nature is massively boosted by linking things together rather than creating silos or preserving a silo. So yes, if that could sort of feed into those documents, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak on this subject first.
Come on to your second point. Was
point.
it on this? No, different point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So my second point is to do with land parcels. So experience of being in a new town, we have found that leveraging Section 106 and the critical infrastructure that goes with that is you're in a more powerful position with a larger land parcel. Is that something that you are thinking about, how you will divide up these sites? Is that something that's part of the strategy?
Stuart or Jonathan on this, or Stephen Kelly?
I think it's fair to say that we've learnt an enormous amount over through a multitude of sites. Some of us were talking about Camborne and the kind of even the phasing of delivery and how that's impacted build-outs. I think the two new sites, effectively, Grange Farm and Camborne North that we've identified, have been deliberately identified for a reason. That point around scale, viability of the infrastructure and the ability to bring that infrastructure forward in the right order. But it's probably also important to recognise that the decision about the priorities as to how and what happens in what order are matters for the planning committee in determining planning applications and the Section 106 agreement phasing. And I suspect that there will be an enormous amount of discussion and exploration associated with that. It would be wrong, given the lessons that we've learned about changing behaviour from retailing and so forth, for a plan to 2045, I think, to fix those. We need the agility of planning committee and more agile 106s to be able to respond. And if anything, rigid planning policy has not assisted us in some of those other sites. So we think there are very good ways of doing it. All of the hooks are in those policies, but of course we'll ask people for consultation, comments and feedback around prioritising.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman, did you want to come back, or should we move on?
Yes, please. So my question was partly about scale rather than flexibility, and also perhaps sort of linked with this is helping ensure that developments don't grow in a piecemeal fashion, because if you have a very small land parcel, the developer is only required to focus on that, and if you have you can't fix the problems of a nearby site with a small land parcel, and you could end up with quite fragmented little jigsaw pieces that don't really fit together. So I'm just hoping that we've learned those things, and that will be within. Perhaps it's not something that will be written, but it's something that we need to understand as a planning.
I think you're
authority.
saying those lessons have been learned essentially, but come back on that, yeah.
I think the point is what you'll see in those policies is absolutely reference to comprehensiveness, how the precise framework for doing that, whether it's master plans and so forth, may well evolve, but absolutely the commitment is that it comes forward in a comprehensive and sustainable way. And as I said, Chair, we've learnt a huge amount along the way around those matters to make sure that we build in the necessary agility and flexibility to cope with changing circumstances.
Thank you for that. We'll move
Thank you.
on. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Heather Williams next, please.
Thank you. Mine is, I think I've got it inside the strategy, but if I've gone rogue, I apologise in advance. So I've been looking at page 83 of the plan, and that's where it goes into the hierarchy. And unsurprisingly, my attention is around sort of the infilling group and the smaller areas. Just want to understand in the strategy how we're dealing with the sort of parish versus hamlet situation, because I've got it in very different for different parts of my ward. So, for example, the parish of Hatley, which is 2 hamlets, they've been separated out as individual infill villages. However, in other areas, which are actually a group, where the group village is the predominant element of the parish, they're not included. So, for example, Oddsey and Cold Harbour in my ward aren't listed at all. So I'm just wondering how we're dealing with that. Are we dealing with parishes or villages? And how, because those hamlets seem to be falling through. So it's just inconsistent, whereas Shingik and Wendy is together, even though they're separate villages. So just how are we marrying that? Just so I can understand, have 2 of my hamlets been missed, or is it because we're dealing with them in a different way?
Jonathan Dixon? Yeah.
So I hope we haven't missed any particular villages. I mean, this is an evolution of the current local plan policies, where group villages and infill villages are in the current plans. And one of the things we've done on the settlement hierarchy, one of the evidence pieces in the topic paper is we reviewed our villages in the right places compared with their current services, facilities and so on. The villages named, normally the villages that have development frameworks, and we've changed the term, but it's the lines around the mother policies map. So the aim is to have them listed where they have defined areas as distinct from the countryside, which doesn't apply to all development all over the district. If there are any settlements missing, clearly people can comment through the consultation, because that's why we're out there, but I hope it's very much picked up all the villages.
Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. Well, the 2, one is a village that's missing and one's a hamlet. If I give that information, because I can guarantee you, if the residents of Oddsey look and they're not listed, they will not be happy.
Thank you for noting that. Yeah, we'll take that away. I'm going to move on. So, Councillor Dr. Martin Khan, please.
Thank you very much. Couple of points. First of all, coming back to what Councillor Heather Williams said, first of all, I just wanted to check whether, I think, what's the term now, established development extent or whatever it is. Well, I used to know as village envelope. Whether these are these strictly defined from the basis of the last plan, or are they open for discussion and amendment in the new plan, in a general manner, if people want to make comments?
Councillor Cheery Hawkins?
I mean, this is going out to consultation, so we are happy to have comments and feedback.
That was a personal thing somebody's commented, so I wanted to know where.
Thank you.
Well, I wanted to know what the position was. Now, the 2 main points. You talked about culture and green spaces and so on, and provision in new developments. In South Cambridgeshire, these sort of features are mainly provided by the parish councils. In the city, a lot of it is provided by the city council itself. One of the things that seems to be certain in the local government reorganisation, which we hope will be in effect when the plan is in effect, is that the city and the county South Cambs are going to merge. And so there's going to be a strong green spaces team, like we don't have, and a strong cultural team, which we don't have. available for implementation over the whole of the district. Therefore, it seems to be important that the policies also apply, so we have some guidance about where, in the wider space, not just in the new settlements. And I wanted to make sure that the policies will provide for that in the new situation, so that one can have a strategy, for instance, for the intervention of the local authority, because that will be important, I think, in the new authority.
Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, I would comment, it's probably premature and beyond the scope of a planning policy to determine who manages the open space. And we know through planning appeals that we're not at the moment entitled to determine that it's the local authority. We have to provide options. So I think that's one of the many things that local government reorganisation may well need to tackle, but it's not, I don't think, a component of planning policy.
I think.
I was simply going to ask whether they would have the flexibility were it needed, rather than to say that it's in
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So just picking up on a cultural offer, again, that's outside the scope of this. And quite honestly, unitary councils are going to be hemorrhaging all their money towards children and adult services, and the risk is there won't be any money left for things like culture.
Positive outlook into the future there. Thank you for that. Probably very accurate, though. I'm going to move on. So,
second, sorry, can I have just one brief one?
Yes, very quickly.
I was in the CPCA growth committee yesterday, when they talked about the local nature recovery strategy. And it's now been decided to have a separate delivery plan, which will define how you're going to actually put what was in the strategy, which is largely aspirational, into practice. I just wanted to make sure that might well be, won't be excluded from being considered in your development plan. Maybe the wording might need to be slightly amended to include that.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So, what happens at the combined authority is working on different budgets and has a different remit to us. This is our local plan, and we need to make sure that it is sound and delivers what local plans are meant to deliver.
I think Bridget has covered it, unless there's anything very quickly you wanted to.
Just to reassure Councillor Khan, obviously we haven't got an action plan, so we can't build it into this version of the plan. As it comes forwards, we will seek to review the plan against any of the contradictions, but we're part of the team developing that strategy, and so
Thank you for that. Lovely. We'll move on. So Councillor Paul Bearpark, please.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to ask about transport strategy. In the WSP report, there's quite a lot of mention of trip budgets, and I think it even suggests trip budgets for each of the major allocations. But when it comes to the actual policy, there is no mention of trip budgets in the policy, but it's mentioned once in the supporting information, and it just says there will likely need to be a vehicular trip budget applied to mitigate transport impacts. So I suppose, I think I'm right in saying that Waterbeach has a trip budget or trip cap at the moment. My perception of that is it's been effective. It's kind of, I suppose, encouraged developers to cooperate with local authorities and other stakeholders to work together in order to manage the traffic demand generated by that site. So I'm wondering what the intention is and whether this policy can be strengthened in line with the recommendations from WSP.
Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. So the trip budget wording in the policy is in the individual strategic sites policies, so for example, Cambridge East and so forth, and we've tried to make it as consistent as possible where, albeit the context in some of the different sites is a bit different. In terms of delivering on the trip budget, so at the moment as the responsibility of the local highways authority, the county council, there is a trip budget note in the appendices to the strategy topic paper, which explains how they're set and how they're delivered. But in short, it is about monitoring, and then when you get to the next phase application, the opportunity to review the things that need to be done to make sure that you keep within that trip budget, which is not to belittle the challenge, but that's the approach that we've taken.
Thank you for that. Councillor Paul Bearpark.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's encouraging. I hadn't read all 700 pages, so probably missed some of that.
Thank you for that. So we'll move on to Councillor Tom Bygott, please.
Thank you, Chairman. To what extent is it suitable or appropriate for a local authority to specify in its local plan what style of architecture should be built? So I was just perusing this generally, and I came across something related to Cambridge East on page 201, where it said that it should adopt a distinctive and contemporary approach to urban design, reflecting Cambridge's identity by respecting the city's design traditions while embracing modernity. And so I've asked ChatGPT to read all the documents, and he's found several other instances of it. But I'm just wondering, should we really be saying to people, you must build using modernist architecture or modernist town planning? Thank you.
Councillor Chumie Hawkins.
I'll just say a few words and then perhaps Stephen can add to that. I think you probably are misreading into that. The idea is that developments actually are characterful, and that you look at the area and you make sure that what is built, I don't know what the design idea is going to be at the time, but the point is that it's general enough and open enough that the character can be maintained or improved depending on what, or on the particular area. We're not trying to be specific here. That's not the point. The point of the local plan is to be able to identify where we can put developments, how we put developments, and of course, make sure that what is, for the future, up to 2045, which is what this is being planned for, that, the flexibility is there to build good communities that enable people to live healthy lifestyles.
Yeah, come back on that and then, yeah.
So if it is designed to be very general in nature, if somebody did want to build a traditional development with traditional streetscapes and traditional streets rather than individual buildings sort of all over the place, which is what modernism tends to do, then firstly, if they came across the sentence, adopt a distinctive and contemporary approach to urban design, presumably the word contemporary would mean that that wouldn't fit. So contemporary usually has the meaning of internationalist modernism. And then a little bit later on, utilising innovative approaches to development typologies, providing taller buildings in appropriate locations to marquee spaces. If you wanted to build streets and squares all of the same height, you wouldn't be able to do that because you weren't providing isolated skyscrapers in this place or that place.
Thank you for that. Councillor Chumie Hawkins first, and I'll come to Stephen Kelly.
I mean, again, we're going back to you asking about specifics, which will come forward when developers bring applications for these allocations. I don't think this is a point for something that we can specify here. And it's, as I say, I'm going back, it's general enough that whatever the contemporary design is at the time, that's what will be built. You might not be here, and I might not be here.
Stephen Kelly.
I think there's two elements here to note, particularly in reference to Cambridge East. Firstly, Cambridge East is a high-density urban development. So I'm not suggesting that classical forms of architecture won't be appropriate, but certainly more modest, lower-density forms of architecture are simply incompatible with the outputs that we're requiring that the place needs for that area. I think the other point to make is, and there will be a range of views, no doubt this is the whole point of consultation on a draft policy like this. The NPPF makes clear expectations that local planning authorities set out, design policies in plans and manage expectations. That includes embracing appropriate forms of architecture and so forth. So I think, appreciate people have different views here. I think it's important to probably test that policy with the community surrounding that area as well as in those other areas that Councillor Weigott refers to. And you know, members, I'm sure, will draw their community's attention to those. We are obliged to seek to try and define the policy, the design expectations for those areas, but that's the point of the consultation process. We believe, looking at the densities that are necessary to realise the contribution that that site makes to the local plan, and thereby minimise the number of other sites, that we will need fundamentally contemporary approaches to urban living. But as to architectural style, that's a matter for
Fine. Okay, I think do you want to come back on that at all, Councillor Weigott? You happy with that response?
I guess we'll have an opportunity to come back at a later stage on this.
Yeah.
But I just think that, you know, we should be avoiding using words like modern or contemporary, because if we create a local plan that leads to applications being rejected purely because they don't comply with a word like modern or contemporary, then we are in effect specifying what kind of architecture, and I don't believe that is the proper role of a local authority in a local plan.
Stephen Kelly, very briefly, and we'll move on. Yeah.
I'm not here to disagree with Councillor Weigott. It is in fact the role of the local plan to determine those strategic design policies. But I think the point is understood. I think it's a matter for consultation. And you know, if there's a sense to which the policy needs to be loosened off, that's something we will take on board.
Thank you for that. Let's move on. So I've got Councillor Anna Bradnam next.
Chair, I've realised my question falls under a different category.
No
so
problem
I'm quite
at all.
happy to defer.
Councillor Richard Williams next.
Thank you, Chair. I think this falls under this category, but please tell me if not. It partly straddles this, partly straddles housing. One of the new and notable features of this draft local plan is it puts significantly more weight on development in that southern cluster, that southern area. Now, the draft policy on Grange Farm talks a little bit about movement and transport links, but I did just want to encourage you to think more strategically about transport links in that area if we're going to build a 6,000 home town, which is bigger than anything that exists in that area, but comes on top of the existing consented expansion to the Genome campus, a little bit more in Baybram. The A505, which links that area to the M11, will collapse if that level of development is put in that area without significant improvement of the 505, but also making junction 9 of the M11 an always junction, so that there are different routes. So I did just want to say, as a strategic point, I think there needs to be more, or some greater thought and certainly more emphasis on strategic transport in the area, given it's taking greater weight. If I could just make one other point, Chair, it's a slightly more trivial point, but just to go back to what we were talking about before, could I just encourage the planning service to look again at boxes? I've just had to look at the West Suffolk plan, which was consented in July this year. It's got boxes. And as somebody who, for reasons outside of my role as a councillor, has in the last 4 months looked at every single local plan in force in England, boxes really help to identify policies.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So thank you for the stuff about boxes. And I think the points around the infrastructure points about Grange Farm are noted. Yeah, and I agree with you.
Thank you for that. We'll move on. Have we got any other speakers on strategy? Councillor Martin Carr.
Just briefly, in light of what Councillor Weigott said, will the plan provide for eccentricity in design as well? For instance, would we be able to have a shark in a roof? So it's an example, you will know the example I'm talking about.
Councillor Chumi Hawkins, please.
Again, this is back to the architecture and the design at the time. And I would just say, can we leave that till when the applications come in? Thank you.
Reasonable, thank you. Has anybody else got anything on strategy? I was just going to very briefly ask about the risks in strategy and what you perceive the biggest risks to be. Obviously, you know, in this document there has been some changes as a result of the water treatment plant not moving and thus not being able to bring forward kneecap. Are there other risks that really could affect that housing trajectory? So things like the airfield not moving, or certain big transport infrastructure not coming forward. What do you perceive, say, the biggest couple of risks to be as part of that strategy? Stephen Kelly.
I think we've tried to be reasonably clear. There are some risks to any strategy, in fact, and a number of those are set out in the documentation. But I would say there are, unsurprisingly, they relate to infrastructure, both phasing and implementation, which in most respects rests outside of the control of the planning authority. At this moment in time, you referenced, for example, the relocation of marshals and so forth. We've sought a number of assurances from marshals, for example, about their departure from the airfield that coincide with the phasing that we've assumed. We have also made assumptions about the rate at which water supply will come forward as a consequence of the now planned infrastructure investment in water and the delivery of further sites. And in respect of transport, the Mayor of the Combined Authority has given a statement of intent that he will prepare a transport strategy by December next year that makes this plan sound by the measures that it includes. So insofar as we can, I would say the externalities are the most significant risks at this stage of the process. We don't need to have concluded against all of those risks, but clearly one always has to manage those risks as we go forwards. The consequences, for example, any strategy, I think, that we would be looking to put forward would have the same water infrastructure problems in terms of supply and treatment issues, and in likelihood, maybe slightly different, but nevertheless, continuing transport strategy-related risks with them.
Thank you for that. And I do accept that it is a live document essentially that would have to change with some of those external risks in the future. I was just getting your interpretation of that. Very briefly, Councillor Hobrang, we'll move on to the next subject.
So I have a question which follows on very directly from yours just now, if that's okay. But I could save it for infrastructure, if you prefer.
It's fine. We'll take it now.
Okay, go ahead now.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it's really about the existing versus new transport infrastructure, which is the link with the last question. So in section 288, page 75, it says, our proposed strategy is heavily informed by the location of existing and committed public transport schemes. But we know that delivering new transport infrastructure is difficult. This is sort of demonstrated by the time it's taken to get C2C even to the point of a public inquiry. So clearly there are significant risks and costs involved in all new transport infrastructure compared with pre-existing public transport corridors. It's clear from figure 1 that the majority of the new housing, so the purple allocations rather than the orange ones, is not close to existing transport links such as railway stations, but it relies very heavily on new transport links, so C2C, EWR and CSET. So really the question is, there's clearly a balance here, so how did you reach the balance, which does have quite a heavy reliance on new infrastructure over existing, in particular rail infrastructure. I'm not sure it's quite clear in the documents how we ended up with that balance. So why is that the best approach, and how will we deal with the risks around that?
Stephen Kelly?
I think, in some respects, Chair, I'd refer to your point that these are inherent risks. Any strategy that we put forward would have a range of risk components, but it's probably important to bear in mind that if one takes the time to look back through the evidence base, the other risks that manifest if one seeks to mitigate these. So the mitigation for a spatial strategy that relies on infrastructure to take growth beyond the green belt, if that infrastructure is not provided, is to build in the green belt on the edges of Cambridge. And therefore the consequences In February 2023, this council and South Cambridge and the City Council agreed a set of spatial principles. In some respects, the delay that we've had from the first proposals is a consequence of us seeking assurance that there is a route through this strategy with both East West Rail, and we've had £2.5 billion committed from government and a very active programme now underway. We've had the TWA applications submitted for Camborne to Cambridge and indeed for the CSET scheme. And I suppose no strategy is risk-free.
Yeah.
But this council very clearly messaged last time they did not want us to go into the green belt to meet this housing need. We therefore have effectively doubled down on finding ways of creating a manageable risk profile for the strategy that we've got forward, and we're confident with that at this moment in time.
Thank you for that.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Chumi, just briefly on...
Yeah, can I just add to that very quickly? Just to give you an example, in the current adopted local plan, we've got Bonnie Airfield, whose delivery is dependent on the C2C. The C2C didn't exist at the time. So this is the process that we can use and we have used to actually allocate sites.
Yeah, okay. Are you happy with that? Yeah, okay. Is it on this point, Councillor Williams? Yeah? Okay, briefly, so we can move on. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's just, Bourne Airfield, I think though, we didn't prescribe in the 2018 local plan, there must be a transport link. And I'm just checking that, because that then provided for what it may be. Are we when I sat on planning committee, we were told that we required a rapid transport system that wasn't specific. So that's what we were told at planning committee. When it comes, you can laugh at me as much as you want. That's what happened. Okay, thank you. What I was going to say in parts of here, like we had there, is there future proofing so that we're not prescribing certain projects and leaving it not vague, but leaving it clear in case new developments come along, because a few years ago things like East West Rail weren't relevant, etc. They are now.
So I think we've sort of covered that in your... Yeah, but just very briefly, yeah.
Just to offer reassurance, so on Camborne North, we have undertaken a transport assessment that demonstrates the infrastructure that's necessary and is referred to in the policy, and that is a polytransport corridor between Camborne and Cambridge and East West Rail together. For the other new settlement, we're clear that the CSET scheme, in terms of the evidence base, is part of the necessary infrastructure supported. So it is specified in the same way as Bourne Airfield required a corridor to be developed.
Yeah.
Can I advise you really think about that, just in case things change? We know over time there's no guarantees with CSET where things will be, as there isn't the C2C. I think vague would give us more security.
I think that's noted, yeah. Yeah.
I do need to say, Chair, that this strategy is dependent upon this infrastructure. If this council is not prepared to support infrastructure through the Greenbelt to these sites that is consistent with achieving a substantial mode shift, then you need to consider another strategy. But the default other strategy is development in the Greenbelt. And so I'm not suggesting, I understand the point Heather Williams is making, which is that these things are not fixed. But you asked me a question about the risks to implementation of this plan. If this infrastructure, and we've been really clear in the policy and the evidence base, if this infrastructure is not delivered, you will need to follow another strategy because this plan is not deliverable. But the consequences for a spatial strategy of this magnitude that does not have strategic infrastructure through the Greenbelt is development in the Greenbelt on the edges of Cambridge. Okay. So I think I do need to be clear about that because
thank you for
that
being
is
clear on
something that people perhaps have forgotten from the previous plan.
Thank you. I think we'll move on, I think. Yeah. Councillor Bradman, very briefly.
Very quickly, Councillor Fane would like to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Bradman. That's all right. I'm not quite sure whether this comes under strategy or individual sites, somewhere between the two, but it directly follows the comments about taking land out of the green belt. And I'm referring really to, in our papers here, this is set out on page 20, paragraph 35, and the decision not to take further land out of the green belt. I just wonder whether we need to consider whether in practice some of that land has already been taken out of the green belt. So if the purpose of the green belt protection is paragraph 143C, then that land may no longer be protected. And I think in consulting on that, we maybe need to make that clear, that there are other factors at play.
Councillor Chumie Hawkins.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what policy he's referring to here.
Councillor Peter Fane, did you want to repeat the last bit of your question regarding the green belt?
Yes, perhaps I could prefer Councillor Hawkins to paragraph 35 on page 20, which is quite specific on this, and my question relates to that. We do not say at that point that some of the land concerned may well now be categorised as grey belt because its purpose is to protect the countryside from encroachment, paragraph 143C, which is not protected as green belt anymore. So in specifying in the paper that we will not be taking that land out of green belt, do we need to just put that in context by saying that it may no longer be in green belt anyway under the government's new classification?
Stephen Kelly, did you want to come in on
We're all trying to work out where Councillor Fane is referring to. Can you just tell us which part of the document he's referring to?
I think Stephen Kelly can answer the question, so I think, yeah, we'll continue.
So just to clarify, even grey belt is statutory green belt. It's just a form of description of that land. So we're not taking any land out of the green belt in respect of paragraph 35. There will be an argument from some, no doubt, as we have received in some of the representations, that some of our land is grey belt land. We're undertaking a further study in light of the government's creation of the concept of grey belt within the green belt to determine whether or not that has any impact. Our consultants haven't yet finalised on that, partly because everybody across the country is looking at this matter of grey belt. So, but just to reassure people, the land that Council refers to is still part of the green belt.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I think we'll move on now. So we'll move on to the next heading, which is individual sites. Who would like to start on individual sites? Councillor Dr. Martin Khan, please.
You'll be aware of the comment I'm going to make because looking at the Cambridge North site, I've commented already, and you'll no doubt be responding, about the fact that the alignment as shown on the plan covers actually directly part of the area of the RSPB Hope Farm, which is why I didn't make the declaration site. That it will be difficult to do mitigation when you're actually covering part of the land. Have you now made progress in looking at that? Would you be wanting to revise it or revise the boundary there?
Terry, did you want to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. So the Camborne North allocation, proposed Camborne North allocation, has two areas. You've got the developable area, which is the area that is the kind of the largest of the extents, and then there is an outer buffer zone, which is called a strategic enhancement area. Now that is where we are proposing for a substantial amount of green infrastructure that would have ecological as well as well-being benefits. Now, we've looked quite closely at the land holdings, and we do not believe, well, we are definitely sure that the developable area does not fall within the Hope Farm land, and we're also confident that the strategic enhancement area also doesn't include the RSPB land. Now, if that is the case, we are more than happy to look at that again. We have spoken to the RSPB as well as the Wildlife Trust in developing the policy, and the evidence base that underpins it, members will see from para 3.3.22 in the justification to the policy that we mentioned the importance of kind of turtle doves and the need to provide habitats for pollinators. That is all based on information that we've gathered through engagement with RSPB. We're very supportive of what they're doing. They're doing an incredible job. Someone described it to me locally as the gold standard of farmland birds and agricultural sort of habitat management. So we are absolutely supportive of what they're doing, and we're looking to work very closely with them. We are actually trying to arrange a meeting with them within the next few weeks to further our conversation with them and to understand what else the policy could do to support not only their aspirations for their land holdings, but also how we can try and extend what they do to the wider area. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dr. Martin Khan, did you want to come back on that at all? Are you happy with that?
As long as the negotiations are going on, I mean, when I looked at it and saw a plan of the actual holding, it looked to me about a quarter of the land was actually within the developable area. But I'm sure that they can come to some agreement. I just wanted to make sure that this was aware.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Lehman, please.
Thank you. I've got a lot of questions.
We'll just take them maybe one at a time. Yeah.
So I could do a few, and then perhaps people could go and come back to me later, perhaps. So my first question was to do with infrastructure in the map that we've seen. There's a whole sort of section to do with North Camborne, and there's an indicative map with lots of lines of potential future linkages in infrastructure, bridges, cycleways, roadways. I would like to understand how firm those lines are. Are they things that we hope to have? Are they things that we wish to secure? Because the amount of density of housing in the north, if the new community is going to function as a coherent community, we're going to need these infrastructure things.
Let's take that first, because it's a big question.
Could I just also ask about the funding for those? Whether, I know it will probably be piecemeal, there'll be a mixture of funds from various sources, but I would like to have pretty early on in this an understanding of how these things will be paid for.
Terry, are you coming on?
Thank you, Chair. So the spatial framework, which is shown in figure 79 of the draft plan, sets out what we refer to as a spatial framework. So that is the high-level kind of key moves that we would expect development to align with as it comes forward. And essentially, it's a spatial representation of what the policy says. Now, the purpose, I suppose, of the consultation is to share this diagram with communities, with stakeholders like National Highways and others, for them to comment on it as well. But I suppose, in a way, what I'm trying to say is that we agree with what you're saying. You know, it's absolutely essential that this doesn't become a cut-off, isolated development. It's fully integrated with the existing town and has really good, in particular, active travel networks with the surrounding villages as well as public transport as well. So this is a kind of starter for 10. We think this sets out our aspiration for the area in terms of making sure it's well plumbed in. And yeah, we are really inviting comments from the community on whether we think we've got this right. In terms of the funding point, where we are at this stage is we've started to pull together what we think is the kind of infrastructure schedule for the site in terms of understanding what does 13,000 new homes and 6,000 new jobs need to support that kind of population. I suppose it comes back to what Stephen Kelly was saying about kind of critical mass as well of people to support those services and facilities. One of the next pieces of work we want to do ahead of work before the consultation next year would be to actually start thinking about a delivery strategy for Camborne North in particular, and potentially some of our other sites as well. Thinking about the timing, because obviously, as we've said, it's very much dependent on things like East-West Rail, Camborne to Cambridge. So there is definitely a sequencing point to go with this, and that will inform not only the timing of the infrastructure, but also, I suppose, the kind of the funding as well, and what funding mechanisms might be available at any given time.
Thank you for that. Councillor Helen Lehman.
Thank you. So just a subsequent question to that. Have you done any sort of engineering review of whether these things would be possible in the places? I don't mean a massive detailed study, but has there been some kind of sort of engineering scoping to see whether these connections would be possible? Because I'm slightly worried about some of the ones that are down near West Camborne, because there's bunds there that have been built as noise barriers for the A428. So I'm just wondering whether they'd be practical or how that would actually work. Thank
Harry.
you.
Thank you, Chair. So there has been some initial high-level work. I suppose as a planning authority, we don't typically get involved in the kind of technical engineering drawing side of things, but we've definitely, the kind of consultants that we have on board are very well versed in looking at the kind of engineering side of delivering these types of pieces of infrastructure. So it's very much fed into their thought process to understand what are the kind of possibilities, but also then the constraints. And I think some of those constraints have actually informed where they think those connections would be best served.
Councillor Newman.
Thank you. I'd be interested to see if, when the through the consultation, if those sorts of points are raised by people looking at the practicality. My second point was actually just a question. I was looking through everything, and I couldn't see. It might be that I've sort of got blinded with it all. In terms of our water, this scale of development, will Camborne Town still be using the existing water supplies, both for drinking water and wastewater? Or would we be moving into different territory?
Stephen Kelly.
I'll ask Jonathan to answer this.
Yeah.
So I guess as a more broader point, going back to the strategy, to highlight to members the work we've done on water and wastewater. So one of the challenges members set us when we last spoke about the plan was to look further about whether there was sustainable water supply available. And since that point, an awful lot of work has been done, including the forming of the Cambridge Water Scarcity Group, which has brought together all the agencies at a government level to address the issues facing Cambridge. And one of the documents we've pulled together working with that group is an evidence base that explores the demands of water created by the overall strategy and how that relates to changes in water supply. So effectively what's happening is we've looked at time in our trajectories, bringing forward new larger scale sites alongside the availability of those water supply sources, such as the new pipeline and the Fens Reservoir and so on. So in that sense, for sites like Camborne, we've very much looked at are there sustainable water supplies available to the site. And similarly on the wastewater, there will be investment in infrastructure required. And clearly our policies require development to take account of the timing and delivery of that as those sites come forward.
Thank you for that. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. I'd be interested to see more detail on that. Thank you. Okay, this is a specific thing about C2C. So there's a whole appendices about C2C's role in Camborne's growth. And there are a number of different possible endpoint bus routes, for want of a better word, for C2C. So the C2C, under this, it would get to the edge of existing Camborne in all of the options, and then it would take, there's a number of possibilities of different ways that it would go. Is that document going to be part of the consultation? Will members of Camborne, existing Camborne, be able to speak about how they feel about those options, or is that just a piece of evidence that's sitting in the background? Thank you.
Stephen Kelly.
Thank you, Councillor Leeming. I know the study. I think I was reading it yesterday. It is a background document. I would, I think it's helpful to understand what it is and what it isn't. It is not a proposed bus routing strategy through the new settlement and through the existing settlements, but it seeks to identify how a bus, the Camborne to Cambridge scheme, extended into Camborne through the linkage off the Broadway from Bourne Airfield and up through the Camborne north side. It identifies a number of scenarios in terms of the objective, which is how many people would be within 400 metres of that route. and it comes up with a number of hypothecated scenarios. They are hypothecated scenarios. We haven't got an approved layout. We haven't even got an agreement to an allocation at this moment in time. So it aims to show how a development of that scale would be able to touch a population within those new settlements. Clearly, the mayor has made clear he is responsible for bus routing and the control of buses, and so it would be a matter, as the scheme came forward, that would inevitably involve from what that is. So I wouldn't take it as an absolute. People can, of course, comment on the objectives within it.
Yeah. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. This may be slightly, this is another question, it might be slightly going back to Councillor Bygot's comments on design. In the whole section on Camborne, there's a lot of reference to Cambridge, but when I've sort of looked through and thought about it more and more, something that's really clear in the heart of this is saying that Camborne, the aim is to turn Camborne into Cambridge's third settlement. So I think perhaps we should think a little bit more about Camborne not existing in a style of Cambridge or in a suburb style. It needs to have its own individual style. And I'm kind of thinking that perhaps rather than looking east to Cambridge, it may be helpful for Camborne to draw some inspiration from other Cambridgeshire towns, such as St Neots or St Ives, that have pretty dense centres, actually, Georgian centres, but that the housing and the property there is quite dense. And I'm wondering whether we could just have a sense that, I mean, I've looked at the pictures of in the strategic, the Camborne Growth Strategy Programme and things like this. I know they're indicative. I know they're not how it's going to look. But all the pictures that are there are incredibly blocky and really urban. And I'm wondering if we can consider ways to build dense housing that doesn't feel like a city, that feels like a town and feels more in keeping with other towns in Cambridgeshire.
So I think we've kind of addressed this already. Chumi, did you want to come back in on that, or just?
I think I'll just go back to what I said before. This is a design that will come down further down the line. We cannot specify that in the local plan. But yes, definitely should be looking at, not definitely what is in Cambridge, but I've said this before, it's the character of the area. It needs to have its own character.
Thank you. So perhaps just some sentences in that aren't about what it's not, but what it could be, and that it needs to have a unique style.
I think that's been noted given some of the questions on that issue. What I might do, Councillor Lehman, is come to someone else and then come back to you. Is that okay?
That's perfectly fine.
Lovely.
Thank you.
So I have got Councillor Richard Williams next, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've got a few points, but they're not very long. Just to pick up on the point that I made earlier about the Grange Farm development, that is a very significant change in this plan versus the old plan. And somebody who's in that area, it raises a lot of questions about things like foul water and all those sorts of things, but just generally in terms of the impact on the existing communities. So, I mean, I think my contribution to this would be, I think given that it is a significant change, it would be useful if some level of briefing could be arranged for parish councils and district councils in that area, because it is a really significant change, and I think a lot of those detailed questions could be dealt with there. And I don't really want to go through all of those here, but
I'm seeing some nodding on that, so I think that's been noted. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
It's underway, Chair. I've already
yeah.
written to the
Thank you. Great. Okay. Thanks. And I just one final point on that. I mean, I think as well as the sort of impact of the site, I think I touched on it earlier, the impact that site could have on other areas as well, and the fact that actually that a 6,000 home town could become the sort of place that people travel to in that part of the world, not just something that people who live there travel from, because there is no town down there. There is no supermarket. If it ends up with a supermarket, it's going to attract so I think that kind of thing that really so that's great. Just a couple of other points then. On the Whittlesford one, being very parochial, I know that's largely rolled over from 2021. If I could just encourage the planning team maybe to revisit that though. The Whittlesford policy about the special policy area around Whittlesford Parkway on the train station. I mean, it talks, for example, about transforming the public realm around the railway station. I'm not really sure what that would mean when you know the area. There are people who already live in that area, and I don't think you can cut off access to their houses, for example, by turning it into a pedestrianised street. I don't really know what that means, so I think maybe that could do with a little refresh, because it's just been rolled over. And then just another quick one on the Sawston. There's a development site in Sawston, well, two actually in Sawston. There's the Old Spicer site. I would encourage the team to think a bit more broadly about the potential active travel benefits from that. It talks about active travel to Shelford, and it talks about active travel to Sawston. That site actually comes into Whittlesford as well, and an active travel route between Whittlesford and Shelford would be of huge benefit and actually could have an enormous impact on encouraging people to use active travel, because that provides a much more straight route, and that site borders, the road. So I think thinking a bit more broadly about that. And then just one other point, in terms of there's a little bit of development in Sawston. Going back to the point that was made earlier about schools, I just encourage the team maybe to think again a bit more broadly about how we can improve, how we can deal with these kinds of things, because there's significant building in Sawston, but probably not enough to put a school in Sawston. But William Westley Primary School in Whittlesford is actually nearer to the south end of Sawston than a lot of the Sawston primary schools, but it has a bypass through the middle of it, which makes it very difficult, very short distance, but actually very difficult to cross because there's a very fast road. So if we thought strategically about, even though this development is on that side of Sawston, actually, if something could be done in terms of improving active travel on the southern side of Sawston, that would actually help with things like access to schools and spreading the burden.
Councillor Toomey Hawkes, I'm seeing lots of nodding on those points, but do come in. Yeah.
In terms of the school, let me take the last one first. Yes, I mean, I've been to the Sawston school maybe twice or three times in the last month, because the YES team has had events there. And so again, when applications come in, we do tend to discuss with the education team at the county. And yes, we will look at issues to make sure that the school, can still be viable. You mentioned the Whittlesford. Okay, I don't know. I think I will defer to John to answer that. Actually, can I?
Thank you for the points. I mean, my initial thought was, this is great, because this is sort of feedback and shaping of policies we want to achieve through the consultation. So I'm happy to take your points and have a look at them now. But if there are points that evolve and can be approved through the consultation, talking with the parish and so on, this is the feedback we want to help make those policies better.
Okay. We'll move. What I'll do is I'll come back to Councillor Lehman for a couple of questions. Then I'll come to Councillor Bygott, then Councillor Khan.
I'll just go with one. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
So one of the wonderful things that I've seen in this policy, it seems like something of the future, is a green bridge for Campbell, and the pictures of examples of such green bridges are just wonderful. So my first question is is that actually really what you were planning? Because it's really lovely. And the second thing is, how early on in the development of the North Camborne settlement and with the East-West Rail, how early on is that actually going to be in place? Because if that's the bridge that's planned to be the main modal shift to get people to walk to the train station, it needs to be pretty early so that people don't get into habits of driving and etc. etc.
Let's take that. Terry, yeah?
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad that the member likes the Green Bridge proposal. I like that myself. Yes, no, it's absolutely critical that the infrastructure goes in early, in particular connections to the station, because we absolutely do not want people to be jumping in their cars to do a 5-minute journey to the station. It's completely the wrong way to go about it. I think East West Rail, as part of their development consent order process, are looking at a number of green bridges along the route. We will be pushing them hard from a development management perspective to be doing that. But that green bridge in particular, linking existing town to Camborne North, is really important, not only from a people perspective, but coming back to your point earlier, actually, around that those nature corridors. It's absolutely critical that we have green bridges in this area to facilitate that, in particular with the Barberstone bats and other species as well. So yeah, absolutely critical that we have that in, and we have that in early. So yes, we're very hopeful that there will be green bridges in Camborne.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
What I'll do is I'll move on and then come back to you. So Councillor Tom Bygott, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So actually, it's quite a good segue into what I was going to ask, because it's all about how people get to the station. And with the Green Bridge, I think that's a wonderful idea, because I watched the A428 being built past Camborne, and I remember that they built it right through the middle of a woodland. All those trees were all clear felled in order to put that bit of road in. My recollection is that South Cambridgeshire contains 105 villages and 2 towns, and it's always important to keep that number updated all the time. And a large number of those villages have poor public transport. There are some villages that have no bus service at all. And the direction of travel in terms of economic viability of buses is probably going to be backwards rather than forwards. And so it's going to be progressively more difficult to have bus services going to all of our villages. So given that a large number of people have no choice but to start every journey by car, the question is, how do people get out of their cars and onto public transport? So one way that people can do that is they can drive to a railway station and get on the train. So in the document regarding North East Cambridge, and this is on page 106, it starts in the section Movement. North East Cambridge is planned as a walkable, human-scale, low-car district. And then on the following page, it talks about a vehicle trip budget that sees no increase in the number of vehicles using the highway network. And then it talks about 3,900 vehicles AM, 3,000 PM accessing Milton Road. So the issue with that is that the North East Cambridge development area contains Cambridge North Station. Now, people used to drive to Cambridge Station, but obviously that's impossible now, pretty much. And if you actually look at a lot of our other railway stations, so for example, Waterbeach has a really tiny car park that's always full. Ashwell and Morden in the hamlet of Odsey has a crazy parking situation where cars are parked sort of almost, on a mound at the side of the road. And so people who live in villages really want to catch the train, but how is that going to be possible if our development plans make it increasingly difficult that every time we build a railway station, we make it impossible to drive there? Thank you.
So this whole local plan is predicated on not increasing car use. I mean, that's why development is around the strategic sites and the only villages where there's development and ones where there's already a railway station. It's already been referenced that it's the mayor who's responsible for buses. So, certainly in my role on the combined authority, moving forward, if I'm still there, or, hopefully my successor if I'm not, we'll be having conversations with the mayor about how we utilise these new, very significant strategic travel hubs, Camborne in particular, certainly Waterbeach, the new station at Waterbeach and Cambridge South, and ensure that there are alternative ways of getting there other than by car. Because undoubtedly, if everybody gets in their cars to get to the stations, they're going to sit in traffic jams, never mind all the pollution and damage to the environment that results. So, there will be conversations about sprinter buses, about little mini buses that that zip about in the villages, which are currently not served, never mind poorly served, which will then therefore link in with these very significant strategic travel hubs.
Councillor Tom Weigott.
Have we considered the possibility that if people can't drive and park at the station, they will do the entirety of their journey by car and give up catching the train? Thank you.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Stephen, but if I just say my bit. So undoubtedly, but if you give people alternatives, if you give them really good active travel, which we've already had a good debate on, if you give them really good ways of cycling or walking to these hubs, you give them an affordable public transport method, then I think, then they will, everything, all the evidence from other places is that people do make that modal shift. If the alternative is sitting in your car and sitting in traffic, in a log-jammed Cambridge, breathing in stinky air for an hour and a half, I think, people will quite rightly decide that it is worth a 10-minute sprint or bus journey or a 20-minute cycle ride that keeps them fit as well in order to get on to sustainable public transport. But if I may ask Stephen for a less emotive answer. Probably.
That's all right. No, I'm happy with that. Just very briefly, because we need to move on.
So very briefly, yes, we have, and obviously those go to the spatial choices that you make about the distribution of growth. One of the things that when you look at the Camborne policy that is interesting is that the actual number of trips that leave Camborne when you increase the size of the town per head of population go down. The reason is Camborne is able to service its own needs. A lot of people leave these settlements to go to other places. It's actually Councillor Williams's point as well about the reason people are having to travel much further is because the absence of local supermarkets, the absence of amenities. So we have given it some thought to it.
Thank you for that. I'm going to come to Councillor Lehman to ask a question, then Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. So I was going to ask a question about the wood/forest that's being planned around the edge of Camborne. What sort of consideration in terms of things like native species has been made? How will it be planted? Who will be responsible for it? Again, I'm sort of trying to understand the practicality of it. And I was trying not to think. There's been a number of press releases out recently about forests and woods being built along the East West Rail route. Are we one of these significant ones that have been spoken about?
Stephen Kelly, did you want to come in on that?
Well, in respect of how does one deliver a forest, we have had a conversation with the Forestry Commission previously about their ambition and the National Tree Strategy, which predates Lord Valence's announcements and the government's announcements about the Oxcam Arc. Certainly with our consultants, we've started to begin the discussion around how do you deliver forests, and there are some interesting kind of fiscal and tax rules that actually incentivise its creation. But as we move forwards, the species, the mix, the format, etc., will need to be properly and fully worked through, as you'd expect, having regard to the wider natural biodiversity objectives for the.
Thank you for that. I'll move on to Councillor Khan.
Okay, it's about Darwin Green development. The country park was proposed upon that. I looked at the explanations of the uses. It talks simply about cycling and walking. The site's on the edge of the city. It's got great potential for other uses which you might use in a country park. And I would, for instance, I mean, I've always had this bee in my bonnet about it's a good site for a city farm, but it could be other sorts of things like a showground. It could be other rural active uses than just walking around, which will be suitable for a country park. And lots of other examples in country parks across the country. Does the provision, the explanation that's given preclude this sort of thing, or would you like it to, can it be made clearer that wider other uses, does it need to be made clearer that wider other uses are acceptable? And this might be relevant, of course, for new areas brought in the other new settlements that have been brought in. Just a thought.
Yeah, so the recommendation is, can that be made clearer in the documentation?
Well, I mean, in many respects, elements of the plan are aspirational. We have to be careful about making commitments because if we do so, we have to demonstrate how they're deliverable. So they are tools to promote the kind of dialogue around those objectives. As we get towards the Reg 19 and the Reg 21 submission of the plan, we will either be able to say more firmly that those are deliverable proposals, or we will have to keep them as aspirations but not make commitments around them.
I'm not so worried about committing to do things. I'm more worried about not excluding the possibility.
They're certainly not excluded.
Thank you for that. I'm going to come on to Councillor Hobro, and then we'll try and, I think, move on to the next subject.
Thank you. So my question is really about the new towns, but perhaps specifically Northstowe. So the new towns so far they've successfully delivered very high quality housing, but they're a long way behind in terms of having their own local shopping facilities, businesses, pubs, other amenities that we generally would expect to see elsewhere in more established towns of a similar size. And just to illustrate this, we go back nearly 20 years to the Area Action Plan for Northstowe from 2007. It talks about a vibrant and diverse town centre with a large number and range of comparison convenience stores, leisure facilities, shops, services, etc. But so far, this has been very slow to appear. So my question really is, how confident are we that the provisions in this local plan will enable these facilities to develop in our new towns? And where we can't achieve that through the local plan, do we have a strategy alongside the local plan to form the partnerships that will allow us to get there?
Lovely. Stephen Kelly, did you want to take that?
So I think there's some, the answer is, in many respects, yes, but it will be for the planning process to determine that.
Yeah.
There is a very different financial dynamic about the delivery of new towns now to 2004 or 7 when Northstowe was put together. And the values of various land uses have dramatically shifted in real terms.
Thank you.
So we will do it differently in terms of assumptions about that infrastructure and how it comes forwards. But there will be trade-offs, including the sequencing of infrastructure. And many of those town centre features that were assumed to be delivered by the markets at the turn of this century are now net costs to a new development, and the sequencing with other community infrastructure and so on will need to take account of that. But most definitely, the new settlements will be approached with that in mind.
Lovely. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next subject, which is jobs, I believe. Now, some of the stuff on jobs may have come up in strategy. Obviously, we've already touched on that in terms of work zones and things. Has anybody got any other questions in relation to jobs? If not, I have just got one. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. It's kind of related to jobs in the sense that it's skills. Apologies if I haven't seen it in the many documents, but is there any provision in this for additional adult skill facilities, sort of regional colleges or adult learning centres? I know it's combined authority thing slightly, but I guess we would have to plan where we put them.
Councillor Bridget Smith, please.
Well, I mean, skills rests with the mayor, doesn't it? So, funding will come from the mayor, and obviously, we will do our best to accommodate new facilities if the need's identified.
Thank you for that. I think we'll move on. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. I thought throughout the document there's a lot of emphasis, and understandably so, to do the biomedical campus and the amount of jobs, growth and creation that will have. But I'm wondering, is it somewhere else that there'll be another piece of work to look at other industries, because it's not just the biomedical. I mean, we have a vast range of things, particularly with home working and the like, and what sort of provisions we're making for those sort of startups with people at home, etc. But I didn't feel, reading through this document, that they had much presence. It felt very dominated to biomedical.
Stuart.
Thanks. So the plan has been informed by two particular sector studies. So one was on the key sectors, which includes biomedical, but particularly ICT, and then the professional services that support all of those, looking at the land needs, where the space type needs are where they want to be, and the facilities that need to be there, and that's reflected in the allocations and in the development management policies. The other big topic, I guess, is, and we'll touch on the working from home as well, but is about industrial and warehousing space. And I imagine you would have spotted there's two particular sites in the plan to meet that higher need identified. But again, that was recognising that not all jobs are in those key labs and office type sectors, and providing for those. Just in relation to working from home, so that factors accommodated in understanding how many jobs we think will come forwards.
Yeah.
In supporting working from home, I don't think there are particular provisions in, say, the housing, whereas maybe in the past there might have been, but I don't know that that's particularly been an effective thing to do in the past. So
something
that's
that
not there.
might be noted as part of the consultation. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. Yeah, I was thinking there is reference to farm diversification and things like that in the most, but I do think that's an area that can be developed. And the logistics, yes, and I'm sure that they will come knocking for more, but just to be clear on my view, we're already providing lots of more homes than we probably should need to, and we're already providing lots of R&D space, and if they want logistical space, they can find somewhere else.
Thank you for that. So I think we will have a break now. I think my question's been answered, so we'll have a 5-minute break. Thanks very much. We'll go live, I think. Lovely. Okay, so on this section, we're going to be talking about housing and homes. Obviously, there'll be some elements that have come up in strategy. I am aiming to finish the meeting at 9:30, so can we try and reduce any repetition of questions that have come up in the strategy section? So who would like to start on homes? Councillor Richard Williams, then I'll come to Councillor Drew.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I have quite a specific question, and it relates to affordable housing and the viability analysis, the new viability analysis that underpins this aspect of the plan. When I looked at the viability appraisal, which tests obviously affordable housing and other policies, I was quite surprised that there's no allowance made at all in any of the site topologies for Section 106 contributions. Now that's not normal as far as I can work out in a Regulation 18 consultation, because I've looked at quite a number of other Regulation 18 viability reports, and they do all factor into their viability appraisal an allowance for Section 106 and SIL costs. But ours don't factor in anything. And it could be quite significant, because if you had, say, a £9,000 per unit, Section 106 allowance, that can make quite a big difference to the financial calculations. So at the moment, we've got this plan which says 40% affordable housing is viable, but by ignoring any Section 106 contributions, which we're going to have to factor in at some point, presumably in the Regulation 19. So is that going to completely change the viability picture? And one other sort of related point to that, one thing I noticed is that in this viability appraisal, zones have appeared, which I don't think were in the 2021 viability appraisal, and the area has been divided up into high value, medium value, low value zone. Now, quite a lot of local plans actually have different affordable housing rules in different value zones. At the moment, ours doesn't. But I'm just interested by the arrival of zones and whether that might result in different zoned requirements.
Thank you for that, Councillor Williams. Jonathan.
So what the viability assessment has done is it looks at the potential value available generated by development, including taking account of the cost of the development, including the standards which are proposed, so the sustainability standards, the water efficiency and so on. And what that then does is show overall the capacity, the value available, while still allowing for a reasonable developer profit, that is available for consideration through Section 106 or still looking forward. And the assessments demonstrate that in the locations taking out of those costs, there is a substantial amount available to provide funding for Section 106 in the normal sorts of levels we would expect to see. We will continue to develop that evidence, including comments received, so people can comment on those issues through the consultation. And I'm sure lots of developers will take an interest in the area. We have already done some consultation with developers and agents to get to this point. On the zones, what that's trying to take account of in the assessment is that land values, house prices and so on vary across the district. So it's trying to make sure that our policy requirements are capable of being operated across the whole area, and we're not developing policies that will only work in certain places.
Thank you for that. Councillor Richard Williams.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose my question still is, why does our Regulation 18 consultation include precisely zero allowance for Section 106? Well, we don't have SIL, but Section 106 obligations, whereas other local planning authorities do include quite a significant allowance for that. So looking at the Swindon Regulation 18 consultation, and they in their equivalent viability assessment, allocate between 5 and 25,000 per unit of 106 costs. And that can make quite a significant difference. So like, if we've got marginal viability on our appraisal with 0 for 106 in any areas, it's actually going to be, or even things that look quite viable might not look so viable once you factor that in. So I'm just confused as to why we haven't included it and other people have.
Stephen Kelly.
I think it's a matter of approach, to be honest with you. The evidence that we've got demonstrates that schemes are capable of making a Section 106 contribution at the appropriate affordable housing level. As Jonathan has said, people will challenge that, no doubt. But I think it's probably, Councillor Williams, something to a different approach in terms of presentation. We're more than happy to discuss that with you if it's helpful to offer reassurance. But we have had alternative sources which clearly demonstrate that in Cambridge we have been able to deliver substantial Section 106 contributions for infrastructure through new development and achieve the 40% affordable housing obligation. We've sense checked through this piece of work. We've also sense checked with another piece of work we're doing with BNP exactly on the matter of SIL, and is there a basis for exploring SIL. So I want to reassure you that we are considering that matter, and maybe Councillor Williams is helpful to have a conversation about.
Thank you for that. Councillor Drew.
Similar in some ways to what Councillor Williams has raised, but perhaps coming at it from a different angle. I'm looking at the very high level strategic focus that the council has in relation to this local plan, in relation to social housing. One of the things that's obviously talked about in the local plan is the fact that there are, I believe the figure referred to is something in the region of 4,500 extra jobs per year expected over the next 40 years or so to be created. We've talked about transport, talked about lots of things. And one of the things that the council has obviously talked about is targeting the 40% affordable housing. We then reference into the local plan and the building of houses, and we talked about Campbell and other new towns in that regard. Yet at the same time, central government seems to be suggesting that it is going to water this down, and it seems to be suggesting that it is less concerned about building social housing and more concerned about, I'm going to be maybe slightly cynical in this, but the profits of the developers. So in what way is this local plan and what is within it going to be able to deliver on the necessary 40% social housing target within an environment in which it seems that central government is no longer providing the strength of support that it has been previously? Because obviously if the ability to deliver at that level of social housing is not going to be possible, that does have rather a profound effect on the viability of people being able to live in our local area, even if this number of houses are built.
Stephen Kelly, please.
I think I obviously can't comment on what the government are doing. They don't consult me, unfortunately, on how to bring forward housing policy. But I think there is a point that we're confident that based upon land values, and I think that's the important point, in this part of the country, and the development values that issue from development, that the 40% affordable housing target is appropriate and justifiable. Clearly, both authorities, the City and South Cambridgeshire, have adopted a joint housing strategy, which is also seeking to try and optimise housing outcomes to meet the needs that we identify across the City and South Cambs. If there are policy changes, which I'm conscious of the national debate about stalled sites related to Section 106, and I was in a meeting with other parts of the country in which there are a large number of Section 106 sites where development is simply not being purchased by the affordable providers. Reassuringly, that isn't the position in Cambridge, and therefore I don't think we're likely to see those measures biting. But it's a matter of national policy that we are working on the basis of the current NPPF, our viability appraisal, and I'm afraid that's all we can do.
We need to keep going, so I'll stop at that point.
Lovely, thank you for that. Anybody else on housing? If not, I will Councillor Bradley, did you?
No, I'm on the next one.
Lovely, thank you. The only comment I was very pleased to see in the document, there's lots of stuff on houses of multiple occupancy, key worker, or, affordable housing. So I just wanted to sort of note that I hope that comes through in the consultation, that it's really important when you've got big sites like Addenbrooke's that we really consider, shared housing, key worker, and how we look at distributing that affordable housing in close proximity to those sites, so that a porter at Addenbrooke's can live near where they work. So we'll move on to infrastructure. Again, I know we've covered a lot of stuff in strategy. Try not to repeat too much. I really want to be done for 9:30. So, Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. Right, this might seem small scale and detailed, but actually it comes, it's in the section which is page 663 of the draft local plan, and it's in the section on policy I/ST, which is about sustainable transport and connectivity. I was not sure whether to put it here or under strategy, but basically in that policy we talk about planning permission will only be granted for development where the site has sufficient integration and accessibility by walking, wheeling, cycling or public and community transport, having regard to, and then a number of things. Now, which incidentally is page 257 of this particular section when you're looking at the electronic pages. But what I wanted to talk about was where, and Councillor Leeming mentioned, where parcels are built out piecemeal. And what I wanted to do was to try and give us the flexibility within the plan, but to try and make sure that where we see parcels being planned as individual sections, that in our policy we have something that says, right, you might be developing your parcel of what is obviously going to be a bigger development, but you must make provision for interconnectivity between the parcels on either side of you. Because, I'll just give you the example at...
Very briefly, Councillor Bradham,
Very briefly,
really
I
need to
will.
move on.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Chair. Fanold Road, Waterbeach. Okay, that was developed piecemeal, parcel by parcel, during the time when we did not have a 5-year land supply, so we knew that we would lose it on appeal. But the point was, in that situation, we have got a whole series of individual developments through which they do not connect to the next door neighbours. And whereas in contrast, in Milton, it was planned all as one piece when the bypass went round Milton, we have connectivity through footpaths through the backs of, behind all the closes, so that there's connectivity between the houses and, in this case in Milton, the supermarket. And that means that a lot more people walk and cycle than would if there wasn't that connectivity.
Agreed.
So can we make provision for that flexibility and interconnectivity?
Councillor Cheney Hawkins.
Thank you. I will just make a brief point, and then if Stephen has anything to add to it. I mean, obviously, the example that Councillor Bradham has given was a result of the lack of 5-year housing land supply, and each of those allocations was looked at on its own merit. So hence the disjoint. But we're looking at strategic sites here, and the idea is that it's going to be a big site, and of course, we've talked about master plans in the past. Things like that will be looked at, obviously, when the development starts to come through. But don't forget, though, that with these strategic sites, they do come up in phases, right? But yes, part of the way we, negotiate with developers is that there will be that connectivity, and we are big on connections, active travel, and making sure that it's easy to get to, where people need to get to.
Question was, thank you, was through you, Chair, was simply, does that paragraph 2A, making direct routes with impermeable layouts that facilitate and encourage short distance trips by walking, wheeling and cycling between home and nearby centres of attraction, which is what I'm talking about in Milton.
Yeah.
Does that give us the flexibility to require developers to think about not only their own parcel, but the parcel next door?
Yeah.
I will say that it does.
Yeah,
but I
thank
might
you.
be wrong.
Stephen Kelly.
Simply yes, and we
Yeah.
will look at that
Okay.
policy. But if we don't have a 5-year land supply, bear in mind the plan is out of date and that policy is not relevant.
Yeah,
And
I think
presumption-
Councillor Toomey Hawkins has articulated that. So, yeah. Okay, let's move on to James Hobro, please. Councillor James Hobro, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. So really, this is kind of a follow-on from the question I had earlier about the towns and the infrastructure within the towns. But this is a meta question about our strategy and our ability to deliver the infrastructure within the towns. Now, our strategy, as I understand it, is very focused on building up the new towns and making sure they become self-sufficient. And when asked earlier about sort of in a bit more detail about whether or not the plan allows us to deliver the level of facilities, businesses, pubs, shopping, whatever, within these towns to make them comparable with more established towns of the same size, there were some qualifications about what we might or might not be able to achieve within the local plan. So my question now is, are we confident that the requirement from the strategy to deliver all of that matches up with our ability to deliver those things in terms of the infrastructure provision, and that it all fits within the plan?
Councillor Toomey Hawkins? Yeah, no problem.
I think insofar as it's possible, obviously some of these costs are difficult to determine. We think this is the most cost-effective strategy from that perspective, as well as the most sustainable. So we do these high-level viability appraisals, we do these high-level appraisals that allow us to form a view on that. But we're confident, and by setting policy, you determine land value as well, through an element of land value. The viability of new settlements is always challenging, but by the approach we followed is geared towards optimising their ability to deliver for the community.
Councillor Stobart.
Thank you.
Chair, we see in the proposals tendency to look south and west, and yet to the east we do have a significant commuting population, even from as far as Bury St Edmunds, and of course from the southeast from Haverhill. I was wondering, as Cambridge grows, those flows may likely increase. And I hope those flows of people and the jobs they're going to have been modelled. But I wonder if this is to our benefit and also the benefit to the districts lying to the east, that we consider these kind of cross-border questions. And so the kind of thing that might benefit is a stronger case for the improvement to the line east out of Cambridge, the rail line east out of Cambridge towards Newmarket. So I'll just park that one, but I wanted to ask, are we also underestimating the role of heavy rail in regard to, for example, freight movements? I don't mean freight movements like container trains coming through, that's a separate discussion, but for last mile and the kind of logistics that came up earlier and we know a bit focused on these A14 developments. Are there rail solutions that we might consider as alternatives or include as part of a longer term aspiration? So
Councillor Toomey Hawkins.
No, there are no other real solutions that we can consider. The only one that we're considering is the potential for a new station at Camborne with East Westfield. There's nothing else on the agenda that I know of, which is why, Camborne, we're proposing what we are for Camborne.
Thank you for that. I will move briefly, if you want to come back.
I mean, just as a note, or a point to note, is there are people who come from West Suffolk, and work at Addenbrooks. And, you can imagine, as we grow the jobs in Cambridge, we will pull more people in.
Been touched on a couple of times.
Just to reassure Councillor, we are talking to, I've been talking to Suffolk County Council from an economic and transport perspective. We've been talking to West Suffolk authorities as well.
Perfect. Lovely. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. So my comments relate to page 296. I'm using the green numbers. I figured that was the easiest way to identify it in the bottom corners. Didn't really know what else other way to go. And page 348. And it goes back to some of the questions that I raised earlier, but specifically, it's when we have the proposed CSET route, as is put on page 348. And also, if we look at page 296, and it's 13D is the paragraph, it says provide a segregated link for the proposed Cambridge South East Transport busway. And I just wonder whether, for the purpose of future-proofing, it would be better to just call it the CSET corridor. And that way, whether it is a busway, which I doubt, whether it's light rail or whatever it is, we are future-proofing the plan because new ideas, new political environments, and we've got the Cambridge Growth Company in there as well. So is that something that would cause a problem? Because what we don't want is to explicitly say a busway and then find out the busway is never going to get built, and that would undermine the plan in the future.
Okay. Stephen Kelly.
We can look at that. We can talk to the Combined Authority. There is an application for a busway at this moment in time. I suppose that's the reason why we've listed it in that way.
Yeah, it's keeping that more open, I suppose, in case of change. Very briefly, we need to move on.
I'll say thank you on that. And other places, I think it'd be better for us to talk about transport corridors rather than specific routes. I just think it's a very live environment, and we don't know, East-West Rail, those sorts of things.
It's been noted. Brilliant. Okay. Councillor Libby Earle, did you want to come in on infrastructure?
I was going to come in again on the road network, and Councillor Williams has already mentioned it. South Cambridgeshire villages are really badly affected by the A505, and we've got two very large developments, one at Hinxton, which is doubling the size of the Genome campus, which is already going through, and one at Grange Farm. We already have queues of up to half a mile onto the A505 roundabout coming up from Saffron Walden.
Yeah.
Does this tie up with actually being able to do something about junction 9 of the M11, which is it's a limited junction, and also cycle routes from those places? At the moment, we have a lovely new cycle track built as far as the A505 junction, which then decants people onto a busy road. No safe way into Saffron Walden. At the moment, it's not tied up. It's not consistent.
Thank you.
I'm concerned that it may not be in the future.
Thank you for that. Councillor Toomey Hawkins, did you want to just briefly comment on that? I know we've touched on it previously.
We have, very quickly, the transport strategy is down to the Combined Authority.
Okay.
And when we have applications coming for large sites, we do look at connections to neighbouring villages, and that's happened, I think, with Welcome, which you referred to.
Stephen Kelly mentioned previously about working with those other organisations and tying the local plan in, and
we rely on them to provide the solution.
Thank you.
We give them information about what we are planning to do.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Bygott, very briefly, because we need to move on.
Very briefly on that point of transport infrastructure and the roads network. So in this plan, there are a number of sites along the A14. For example, the one at Slate Hall Farm. There are many countries in which, when you drive along the motorway, there is basically just strip development all the way along between all towns. How are we going to stop development in South Cambridgeshire being strip developments all the way along the motorways? Thank you.
Stephen Kelly.
So the way we do it is we identify what the need is, we make allocations for that need, and we resist development that does not satisfy the plan allocations. The open countryside is protected in its own right in the local plan, and the allocations are aimed to manage this issue, so we do not end up with strict.
Thank you for that. I think that's clear. We're going to move on to green issues, and Councillor Stobart. Yeah. Councillor Bradley.
I'll keep the question short because it is quite straightforward. Are we doing enough around heat network in terms of the plan and the vision that we're trying to establish around heat networks and district heating?
Lovely.
And is there a strategic perspective around it? Yeah.
Okay. Terry, do you come on, or Stephen Kelly?
Chair, if I can comment, we are actually doing work in Cambridge at the moment around a district heat network.
Okay.
That requires density and mass and population.
Yeah.
It's not a solution for the large part of South Cambridgeshire at this moment in time.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to draw our attention back to the first part of the local plan, which is green number page 18, and figure 2 shows a map showing proposed strategic green infrastructure initiatives. And on that map, there is an area 6, which is identified as North Cambridge green space. And I'm very glad to see it there because it's a really important space. But what I wanted to try and establish is whether that is actually a designation as a green space, or whether it is simply relying on the green belt designation to keep it green, because already that area has been eroded by, firstly, the park and ride site, secondly, warehousing on existing agriculture, and thirdly, forgive me, the Cambridge Southern hub for the police. So this green belt, while strong, is not completely secure. So I just want, this is an essential area for the north of Cambridge. It just happens to be close to my ward. I'm just saying it's on the map. It's not you know. So can we have some clarification about that?
Stuart, did you want to come in on that?
Thank you, Chair. So no, it is not a designation in the plan. It is a statement of the vision or ambition for green infrastructure across the area. So it's intentionally not defined boundaries. They're broad. We are seeking to identify a specific green infrastructure proposal in the plan, such as in Camborne, and in that area, the one that is in the infrastructure plan is about an expanded Milton Country Park.
Thank you for that. I'm going to move on.
Sorry, can I just say, I think all around Cambridge, we know, don't we, with all of these extra houses that we're needing to deliver as part of the local plan, we're going to intensify populations.
Yeah.
And I think we need to safeguard areas for green space that is open as an amenity for residents, because you know, what can the local plan do to address the fact that we don't have enough open green space?
Okay.
And can we use the local plan to suggest designation of additional, for example, public rights of way? There are very few in that area. So can we use the local plan to actually enhance this area for the benefit of local people?
Do you want Stuart, just briefly, very briefly, come back in on that?
So yeah, so the green belt, there are objectives to improve, and where you allocate, you need to improve around it. You can see that against the CBC allocation, for example. I guess in terms of designating and actually delivering additional green spaces, I think absolutely that's the point. More people, more space needed. We need to identify actual deliverable projects, and so the infrastructure plan lists some. We want to get to a further stage where we can list more and work with partners. Clearly, the district councils aren't the body that delivers these spaces, to bring forward more projects that can support the vision that we started the conversation with about those areas. But it's not, we're not at a finished place here. We need to do more work. We recognise that.
Thank you for that. So we're going to move on now to places, and within places, we've already covered a lot of that area, whether it be communities, social, schools, well-being, design. I think. Did anybody have anything else they wanted to ask on this? So I'll come to you, Councillor Stobart, Councillor Lehman after that.
Chair, thank you. Public art policy, what is it? Where does it sit? How do we influence it?
Lovely. Public art policy. Lizzie.
Feels a long time ago when we started talking about this, but I believe it is covered under the establishing high quality and public realm policy. We've had a lot of conversations in-house about how we can integrate public art into new development and ensuring that it's influenced by local people and it's a community right. So we've built it into the policy, and it sets out, where that can be designated and where that'll be formally or informally. I think it runs as well through the thread in the supporting text and refers to existing supplementary planning documents. And we also are looking at site-specific public art as well going forward. Have you
maybe we can send the detail out afterwards of the specifics. Yeah. Can we move on? I think we've got, yeah. Lovely. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. The first one is about street trees. Do we have any? Is there any section of the policy that's to do with street trees? They're great for people's mental well-being, temperature, water control, wildlife corridors, etc. Thank you.
Stuart.
Thank you. So national planning policy requires provision of street trees. I couldn't tell you the paragraph, but it is in there.
Lovely.
We have looked at it. There is a challenge to define it because there's a relationship with the highway land as well as development land, so we haven't included it in the actual local plan policies as such.
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Could we ensure that it doesn't disappear, that we are generous with our street trees?
Thank
because
you.
I think it's important for people's well-being. Second point is to do with health provision. I know health is predominantly a county matter, but we have to plan for the location of health sites. I'm particularly thinking of the size of the population in our area, whether we need a kind of small tertiary outpost of a hospital, whether it's a minor injuries unit or some kind of day centre where people can, I don't know, have their follow-up appointments from a consultant. Have we considered a location for this?
Please.
Yes, so it's something that we're actively looking at the moment. So we're having conversations with the NHS commissioners at the moment to commission a study that's going to look in much more detail about the health infrastructure that's needed, both for Greater Cambridge. We're also looking potentially to look at a wider area because obviously the commissioners have a broader remit that goes beyond Greater Cambridge. So we're actively talking to them at the moment about aligning the work we need for our local plan to feed into our infrastructure delivery plan that's been mentioned a few times already tonight, but also to align that with their kind of wider estates strategy for the next 10 years as well. So yeah, it's something that we're actively looking at the moment, and we're going to be continuing to develop the evidence on that through to the next consultation, which is due to take place next year.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
I'll be happy to see that in the next consultation. I didn't notice it in this one, but now I understand why. But it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. And I think, obviously, when we think of place, there's lots of people think of sort of towns and those larger areas, but the smaller ones want to keep their sense of place as well. When I was doing some comparisons between the 2018 local plan and the current one, I'd say most policies are still in place. Some have been merged. But there's one thing that I couldn't really link across, which was NH11, the protected village amenity areas, and NH13 about the important countryside frontage. And actually the frontages are quite an important thing, so that feeling of place comes into green as well. So it could be that they've been morphed into something I can't match them to, but they're the ones I struggled with.
Can we come back with the information via email to Councillor Williams on that? Yeah, lovely. To show how that's been morphed. Right. Councillor Drew. We're going to make Councillor Drew the last speaker on this, and I will sum up, and then we will move on.
Okay. I have two that are sort of places, but are wide-ranging. The likely population of Camborne will become in excess of 50,000 people. That will make it on a par with Salisbury, Folkestone, Lowestoft, Royal Leamington Spa, Macclesfield and Hereford, places that we would consider proper big towns. But it will remain a town with what is basically a parish council. Now, that's fine. You can have those things. Northampton is the largest parish council in the country with a population of over 100,000 people. However, it's really, really difficult to scale up in the way that it's going. Where in the local plan will whatever authority is responsible be providing the necessary support, guidance, mentoring and support for the growth of Camborne Town Council from its current 14,000 to an excess of 50,000, because that is a huge undertaking.
Who would like to go on that? Stephen Kelly.
Would just to say that's a wider community governance issue rather than a local plan issue.
Yes, but the local plan makes the decision to do this. So therefore, surely the local plan has to connect with... No, it has to. We can't put things in the local plan and then say, well, that's nothing to do with the local plan. It has to connect to it, doesn't it?
Not where there is alternative legislation to address the issue. So local plans are bound in the same way that they are under the Planning Acts. They can put policy in place. There is a provision that provides for the evolution of governance and capacity of governance, but it is very much in the way that local plans do not decide whether South Cambridgeshire is the planning is in a sense the area of South Cambridgeshire. That is a matter for other governance structures and other legislation. It would be wrong for any local plan to predetermine the outcome of a process which looked at the local level governance of a locality.
Councillor Drew.
I worry about things like this because it looks like it looks to residents like we are not being strategic. I understand what you're saying and I don't disagree with what you're saying, but if I am a resident of Camborne at this point, I worry already about my town and its governance. If we are going to grow it to 50,000 people, I worry. Secondly, within the local plan, what action is being taken to ensure that the naming of streets, of which we will have hundreds of new streets, is going to be diverse and reflect the population we have? Because the current naming of streets doesn't. So therefore, we've done a lot of work in Camborne to diversify the naming of streets. What will the local plan be doing to ensure diversification of street naming so that bottom line is the people whose streets are named after don't all look like me?
Stephen Kelly.
So street naming numbering is dealt with by the 3C Shared Services Building Control. It operates to I think, a policy approach that has been agreed by the councils. It's not which gives it far more agility to be able to reflect trends and community aspirations. Perhaps, Councillor Drew, it would be helpful for me to explain where one might find that approach, but it's most definitely not in a local plan that takes 7 years to produce and 20 years endures for 20 years, because I think we want more.
Thank you. I don't agree with you. Thank you, Councillor Bratman.
Lovely. Okay. I really want to sum up, so it must be quick. Yeah.
Yes, just to say that actually with Camborne North, it's not within the parish, it's in with the other parishes. So there will have to be a governance review from Civic Affairs. But to begin with, what we have to be mindful of is they will actually have to vote potentially in sort of Knapwell and the other areas.
Okay. So I'm going to sum up. And so firstly, I just wanted to say that all of these points that have come up, obviously we're embarking on the consultation. So, you know, it's important that these points do come up in the consultation. You approach lead members, officers with your thoughts on the local plan, areas where you think it can be improved and changes that need to be made. But I feel that these documents are in a fit state to head towards consultation, and I think we've asked lots of questions around the consultation, scrutinised the documents at large, and we've achieved what it sets out on page 12 in terms of the recommendations. Is everybody happy that we have done that collectively?
Agreed.
Agreed. So we will move on to the work programme, which is as noted in your papers. If anybody has any questions on that, please come to Councillor Drew or myself, and we will add things that you want to see on the work programme as best as we can. So the date of the next meeting is going to be on the 13th, so next week. Councillor Williams.
I'm really sorry, Chair. I hadn't what I thought was an AOB on the local plan. It's one very short thing that I think has been omitted.
Can we, we'll take it at a later date, I think. Can you put it through the officers?
Yeah,
thank you.
Just for clarity, it's the Lords Bridge radio telescope, may not be relevant, but there's no policy or reference, as there was in 2018.
Okay. So the next meeting is on the 13th of November. Thank you all for your attendance. Thank you to the officers for being here late and the lead members for their attendance.